The year is 1986, and Doctor Who is on the chopping block. After a controversial few years under showrunner John Nathan Turner, resulting in increasingly low ratings, the show had been axed, and it was only through the rallying cry of very devoted fans and one extremely banger song that the show was able to get back on the air. Hans Zimmer was involved with the production of the song. I'm not even fucking with you. Even though the show would be returning, its future was tenuous at best, and if it wanted to survive much longer, it would have to prove itself to BBC's higher-ups. The show was on trial, so John Nathan Turner and script editor Eric Sayward leaned into it, creating The Trial of a Time Lord, a special season of the show comprising 4 stories.
The accused will remain silent until invited to speak.
The accused? Do you mean me?
And if he is found guilty, I strongly suggest the termination of his life.
They also brought back one of Doctor Who's most popular writers of days past, Robert Holmes, in order to aid them in this effort. The show's future hinged on the success of this season. And having seen it, I can say that that's very unfortunate.
Protect me! I am your Lord and Master!
Working on Trial of a Time Lord is what killed Robert Holmes. The show was never truly able to recover in the ratings, and just a few years later, it would be cancelled forever. Meaning until 2005. Now, why am I opening a video about the 60th anniversary on this tidbit? Well, because sometimes history has a habit of repeating itself. I'm just kidding. That's how I would open the video if I was a negative Nancy. Because no matter what your opinion of the new Doctor Who episodes is, there's no way you can say they're as bad as Trial of a Time Lord. And plus, the BBC was actively conspiring to take the show off the air in the 80s, whereas now it seems like they're relying on it like a lifeline. So these two periods in the show's history are very distinct. And yet, despite all this, there are still some serious similarities, especially where the court of public opinion is concerned. But before we get into all that, let's celebrate 60 years of Doctor Who, ladies and gentlemen. This one television show has been on the air entertaining scores of annoying halfling people, and some adults too, for 6 decades, carving itself a place in television history and spreading British propaganda to foreigners like me far and wide. I would have been brainwashed into unconditionally loving Britain by now if it weren't for all the commenters that derogatorily called me American and said I wasn't allowed to have an opinion on the show because of this. Even though I'm not American, I'm Canadian, and guess what? So was the guy who came up with the idea for the show. Google it. You motherfuckers, we give you the idea and this is how you repay us. Fucking ungrateful. No other show in history has changed as much over such a long period of time as Doctor Who, making it, in my opinion, one of the most interesting shows out there to analyze. Sure, there were some rough patches here and there, but if this show were a person, it could start thinking about retirement. That's an accomplishment worth celebrating. However, I do fear that Doctor Who, in its old age, may be having something of a midlife crisis, because it's really trying to recapture its youth. Following an especially controversial few years under showrunner Chris Chibnall, the show is officially resetting back to season 1, and Russell T Davies, the man responsible for helming the show's most critically beloved era, is back at the wheel. But that's not all. They also brought back David Tennant, who was the face of this era, and Murray Gold, the composer of this era, and all the producers that produced this era, and presumably the head janitor from this era as well. Russell also brought back everybody's favorite red-headed companion, Melanie. Melanie was introduced in Trial of a Time Lord, fun fact. And thank God they brought her back, because I don't know if these specials would have worked if they hadn't included the only good companion Doctor Who's ever had. And perhaps most shockingly, the show will now be funded by Disney going forward.
I've got money.
Yes, you have.
It's official. The Americans have Doctor Who. Abort. It's been pointed out to me that I kind of accidentally foreshadowed a lot of these developments in my last video about Doctor Who. She's like Disney's version of the Doctor. The Seventh Doctor has become a cult favorite in the Whoniverse, which is a word I've never used before and hopefully never will again. Who will the next Doctor be? What will they be like? Will they be another 11th Doctor clone? Will it be David Tennant? I think the universe is playing a cruel joke on me. What's important is that the band is back together. And they even gave David Tennant enough hair gel this time. Maybe they even overcompensated a little just because of how much they messed up with the 50th. It's so flat. So, yay! They brought Mr. Good Writer Man back. Doctor Who is saved. The end. How much video is left? Oh my goodness.
I think the story hasn't ended yet.
Hello viewers, this is post-editing Verdana just jumping in to say that chapter 1 of this video is kind of its own self-contained analysis of the greater landscape of media criticism and writing trends in recent fiction. It's all necessary setup for everything I say later in the video about Doctor Who as a whole, but if you're only here because you want to see my thoughts on the 60th anniversary specials in particular, you can skip this opening segment. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm not encouraging you to, because I think it's important, but it is kind of its own discussion that is largely separate from Doctor Who. I spend a decent amount of it talking about Star Wars, so the choice is yours. You should watch it though if you want to get the full experience. Chibnall bad. This sums up what the Doctor Who discourse has been for the last 6 years. Ratings down, fans unsatisfied, retcons that people don't like, etc, etc, etc. In the lead up to the 60th, the discourse surrounding the show had gotten quite nasty.
Why don't you just die?
I mean, pretty much everyone's contributed to it to some extent, including me. The very first attempts at video essays I ever made on YouTube were about Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who, and I have grown to hate these half-baked ass videos, but that's not the point. The reason I never followed these up with any more Chibnall bad videos is because, well, it's already been said. Even though I still strongly dislike Chibnall's era, there's no reason to milk it for video after video after video of repeating the same talking points over and over and over and over and over. But out of this backlash was born a backlash to the backlash. Chibnall's era has found its fans online, who are increasingly dismissive of common criticisms of the era. And I think currently there's less agreement amongst fans on how to properly criticize this show than there's ever been before. And if we're gonna proceed, we need to establish a definitive framework through which I can criticize this show. Definitively. A lot of the runtime in my original Chibnall video essays focused on how I perceived the filmmaking to be very shoddy and amateurish at times. But a fan of Chibnall's era might retort by saying, the show has always looked cheap, so why are you singling this era out? Some of them might even go on to say the campiness is a part of the show's identity and should be encouraged. Let me give you an example. Here's a moment from the Series 2 premiere New Earth. So, it's obviously laughably bad, but it's also undeniably hilarious and kind of charming. And if you happen to like camp, this was practically made for you. Oh, and fun fact, for some reason Doctor Who has never been able to do falling shots well. I don't know why, it's just a consistent rule. So here's my question. Is campiness in Doctor Who a good thing? I mean, sure, it can take me out of a scene, but at the same time, it does bring me a lot of enjoyment. Like, you wouldn't say that the campiness should be taken out of something like a Rocky Horror Picture Show because that's the appeal. I mean, Doctor Who's reboot was based on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, another show people love for being cheesy. Is Doctor Who in the same boat? Let's just put a pin in that for a minute. What's a more objective critique? What about pointing out a hole in the show's logic? That's a fair and valid critique, right? Well, you'd think, but there are a lot of people who very avidly swear that logical inconsistencies don't matter because this is an inherently goofy and ridiculous show. And when a show is funny goofy, It doesn't have to make sense. You'll see this all over Twitter or in any comment section criticizing the logic of an episode. It's a dumb family show, it's meant to be fun, not to make sense. If it were trying to be some sort of hyper-realistic sci-fi, not every alien would just look like a human with their face painted red, and the rules of time travel wouldn't change every week depending on who's writing the episode. Shut up and enjoy it. And plus, the Doctor Who universe is so expansive that trying to hold true to every last tiny diminutive piece of lore the show has ever put out there would be an almost impossible task, and even if you did, it might limit your options as a writer, right? Before we can go any further, dear viewers, I need to answer both of these questions right here, right now. And to do this, I need to ask another question. Yeah, we're getting somewhere, I promise. What kind of show is Doctor Who? I mean, for us to know whether cheesiness is good and a lack of logic is fine, we first need to definitively say what Doctor Who's goal as a piece of art is. For example, a sitcom's goal above all else is to make you laugh. A soap's goal is to make you cry, an action film's goal is to excite you, a mystery film's goal is to intrigue you. So what is the goal of Doctor Who, a show that's always changing? Should it be first and foremost educational? That was the original purpose of the show when it first hit the airwaves.
It's an Aztec mask. Well, he must have died around 1430, I should think. How'd you know that? All these things belong to the Aztecs' early period.
Though with the popularity of the Daleks, that quickly stopped being the case. Or should it be scary? That's what the show was most known for the first few decades of its run, though I wouldn't say people tend to think of it as scary nowadays. What about emotional? Good drama is often cited as the reason the 2005 reboot of the show was able to take off, until everyone started calling it a melodrama. Or conceptual. Each episode an exploration of the dystopian futures that could await us if we're not careful, like Black Mirror.
See that there? That's the Great Atlantic Smog Storm. It's been going 20 years. We get news flashes telling us when it's safe to breathe outside.
So the population just sits there?
Unless that's a little too depressing. Alternatively, should it be a comedy? Enjoyment first, plot second. Because fun is all that matters. Except that everyone complains when episodes like that come out. Truthfully, its goal seems to change with every episode. It is what I like to refer to as a sandbox show, because from a writing standpoint, it is a playground. It can be one thing one episode,
When I close my eyes, I hear more screams than anyone could ever be able to count.
and then something entirely different the next. Doctor Who isn't tied down to a regular cast, setting, theme, or even genre. It just does whatever the fuck it wants. And you gotta respect that. That being said, the show has had its fair share of different eras, and each era has different priorities, like a new coat of paint. Some eras are more silly, some are more serious, some are more what the fuck did I just watch?
Come on, you must take the load. You must.
The one constant is change. With this in mind, let's return to the first question. Is cheesiness a good thing in Doctor Who? Honest answer, it depends on the episode and what that episode's goals are. Sometimes it can be. You look at something like The End of the World and it leans into its campiness really effectively. It's not my favorite episode of the show ever, but it is undeniably very fun.
Let us mourn her with a traditional ballad.
I think the reason why the cheesiness works here is because it matches the tone that the episode is trying to convey, absurdism. Other times I think the cheesiness can be a problem, and the snippet from New Earth I played earlier is an example of that. Another episode that features Cassandra, look at that. I think what's important here is that the actual emotion the scene was trying to touch on, i.e. making the audience scared of the threat pursuing the Doctor and Rose, does not come through owing to the poor execution. I think the argument that audiences inherently like cheesiness within Doctor Who really gets disproven by the fact that just about all of Doctor Who's top-rated episodes are not cheesy episodes, and most of its lowest-rated episodes are. You wouldn't say that one of Doctor Who's psychological horror episodes, like Midnight, would be better if it was goofier, or at least I hope you wouldn't. The same logic applies to Doctor Who's spin-offs, even the ones shooting for different age demographics. One of the most critically acclaimed pieces of Doctor Who media ever released is Torchwood Children of Earth, which is an extremely dark miniseries detailing an alien invasion that targets children. Children of Earth stands in stark contrast with early Torchwood seasons in terms of its directing and editing, and there are no scenes that involve a sexy Cyberman fighting a CGI pterodactyl with wacky sound effects playing over it. Comparatively, this season feels like prestige drama. It's vastly less cheesy, and yet everyone likes it more. It's also one of the darkest pieces of Doctor Who media ever released. Deformed Captain Jack Harkness jump scare. Children of Earth again proves that Doctor Who has more pull than just goofy camp. Even where its spin-off shows are concerned, there are other things that audiences are looking for here. Even with that being said, I still enjoy camp.
Travel halfway across the universe for the greatest sex. You still end up dying alone.
But I also think there's an important distinction to be made between camp and cringe. What's the difference? Camp is just anything absurd, exaggerated, or cheap-looking in the show that can be very enjoyable, and the show can be self-aware of.
There are 3 important, brilliant, and complicated reasons why you should listen to me. 1.
Cringe, on the other hand, is when the show sets out to do something and completely fails at it. Take something like The Lie of the Land. Extremely in-your-face political commentary that makes 1984 look subtle by comparison.
Everything they told us, all that we believe now, is a lie.
Check. First-year film student editing that thinks it's being really deep.
I'm going to be here for a long time yet.
Check. Seriously, who put this here? I want to know. Extremely forced humor. Check-a-rooney. This episode may be camp, but it's also cringe. And cringe is not good. Cringe is bad. Remember this distinction because it will be on the test. And on that note, let's move on to question 2. Does Doctor Who require logical consistency in its writing? To be fair, this is a question that extends far beyond Doctor Who. I think everyone remembers when The Last Jedi came out and this debate was raging around Star Wars. That was such a fun time to be online.
It just fills me up with so much rage inside of my body that it starts lighting my brain cells on fire.
Does it have to be 100% in line with the lore of the movies that came prior? This is the movie that really got this debate raging. Do the characters have to act the same way we remember them? Or can the creators take certain liberties to tell the story that they want to tell? The verdict was, and still remains, split down the middle into 2 factions. One side believes that films and TV should prioritize realism and logical consistency above all else. The other that they should prioritize themes and escapism. Camp A is more likely to criticize plot holes or contrived character motivations, and Camp B is more likely to criticize a piece of art's underlying message or the emotional experience they had with it. I've also noticed that most people in Camp A tend to view art criticism as objective, whereas most in Camp B tend to view it as subjective. And for years now, most online discourse about movies has been swallowed by this larger debate, with more and more YouTubers becoming entrenched into their own faction, and the war continues to rage to this day.
At the end of my assessment, I said that the film was overall objectively bad in terms of filmmaking. It is of poor quality. The utterly broken script was bleeding errors with every second of screen time that passed. There is an ongoing conversation about objectivity versus subjectivity. I have been made an example of by a handful of people as the channel who thinks his opinions are facts.
Or to put it like he likes to, his opinions are objective.
All those plot holes people complain about, they don't actually matter. So if everyone acted totally logically all the time, only making the most logical decision in any situation, no one would be acting human. Thus, there would be no conflict, which would lead to no drama, which would lead to no stories.
Just as it's also true that if characters are making random, illogical decisions just to further the plot, they're not acting human either. And the fact that humans aren't purely logical creatures isn't something you can just whip out to justify any character decision you like.
Here's Star Wars actor Sam Witwer explaining Dave Filoni's approach to writing, which falls pretty squarely into the formalist camp I discussed, though Filoni takes it to an extreme.
Dave Filoni and I once had this argument that educated me greatly, because I was all concerned. There was this thing I was recording as Darth Maul for this audiobook, and it wasn't, strictly speaking, consistent with something that we did in Clone Wars. Right. And I said, Dave, what should I do? Should I tell them to change the line? Should I blah, blah? What do you think? How do I solve this problem? And he just said, Sam, it's good if the stories are different. Well, what do you mean? It has to be consistent. He's like, no, it doesn't. These are all tall tales, and they all of the tellings. It's great if it's a little bit different. That's reason to go seek that out, to get a different perspective on the same story. This campfire that night that was told that story, this happened and Ahsoka's lightsaber was blue, but over here you heard the same story and Ahsoka's lightsaber was green, and that's good. And when I thought about what he said, I'm like, he's right, and that's always been the way it was with George.
Dave Filoni values the viewing experience of his shows more than he does their logical consistency. If he wants to do something, he kind of just does it regardless of whether it actually fits into the greater Star Wars timeline. In this sense, he's able to avoid constraints and tell whatever story he wants to tell. Random example, Filoni evidently liked the fight scene between Obi-Wan and General Grievous in Revenge of the Sith, so when he started working on the Clone Wars, he added in more fight scenes between them, except that the Clone Wars takes place before Revenge of the Sith in the timeline, and it was evident in that movie that this was their first ever duel.
You fool! I've been trained in your Jedi arts by Count Dooku!
He even went as far as to add references to the fight, which hadn't happened yet.
Hello there.
Hello there.
General Grievous is not the kind of dude that would have just said that. But on the flip side, by ignoring continuity, he managed to give us a bunch of cool fight scenes. Many consider him to be one of the best Star Wars writers there's been, but as you can probably imagine, he also has a lot of passionate detractors. Again, it's really a question of what you value more, realism or formalism. So where do I fall in this debate? Personally, I've always been inclined to believe that themes are the most important piece of any art. After all, if you're not trying to convey any themes, what are you even trying to do? I do personally think that the subjective experience that a piece of art gives you is the most important thing it has to offer. And I can accept logic being stretched a little bit in service of a piece of art's themes or the emotions it wants to elicit. Like, John Wick films are allowed to break the laws of physics as much as they want because they're not supposed to be realistic movies, they're supposed to be fun action. That being said, I'm not of the opinion that logical consistency should be completely chucked out the window. You have to remember that millions of people are really invested in these fictional worlds, studying every last detail, every last frame. And if it feels like the creator isn't putting in the effort to actually keep track of what came before, why should the audience? In my mind, all inconsistencies will do is scare the audience off from actually paying attention to every last detail you present them. After all, if they notice something didn't seem right earlier but it didn't end up leading anywhere, why should they assume it will lead somewhere the next time? Which may cause them to miss out on intentional subtext that you actually want them to pick up on. What if the writers wanted to change a character's lightsaber as a representation of their changing personality? Viewers who might otherwise have caught on to this visual metaphor might now just think it was another mistake, kind of hampering the writer's ability to visually convey the themes they wanted to convey. And the honest truth is that this writing ideology has taken root in Doctor Who. I'll give an example. In Series 12, Chris Chibnall completely retconned the show, establishing that the Doctor had lived countlessly more lives than we knew about before regenerating into the first Doctor and having his memory wiped. This is known as the Timeless Child retcon. In episode 5, we meet one of these secret pre-Hartnell regenerations, known as the Fugitive Doctor, and we see her TARDIS. It's the same old recognizable blue police box we all know and love, and it sure does make for a shocking moment when the 13th Doctor uncovers it.
What is this? Let me take it from the top. Hello, I'm the Doctor.
What a cool twist, with only one slight problem. It doesn't make any sense. Now, one of the most surface-level pieces of knowledge that anyone could possibly know about Doctor Who is why the TARDIS looks the way that it does. It's referenced constantly.
What's with the police box? Why does it look like that?
It's a cloaking device.
The TARDIS is meant to disguise itself wherever it lands. But I landed in the 1960s. It disguised itself as a police box and the circuit got stuck.
The Doctor stole a broken TARDIS from Gallifrey, landed it in a London junkyard in the 1960s, it assumed the form of a police box to blend in, the chameleon circuit broke, and when he took off, it retained that shape forevermore.
It's still a police box. Why hasn't it changed?
This is something that practically every Doctor Who fan or even casual viewer should know. And this of course begs the question, if the fugitive Doctor comes before the first Doctor in the timeline, why does her TARDIS look like this? In fact, she shouldn't even have the same TARDIS at all. She hadn't stolen it yet. For this to make any sense, you not only have to turn off your brain, but you have to actively fight against your basic knowledge of the show. Personally, I think I can safely say that this is bad writing on purely logical grounds, regardless of what you think of this retcon thematically. Doctor Who's lore at this point is fundamentally broken, something even the most diehard fans can admit, and I think that's a shame. As for people saying the show is so big there's no way it could possibly have a coherent lore, I don't really agree with that. In terms of New Who at least, we've never really had a showrunner that tried to keep things coherent. Funny enough, one of my least favorite eras of the show, John Nathan Turner's, actually did a pretty good job keeping consistency between different Doctors and seasons. It felt like there was an unfolding story that built on what came before without contradicting it. And I like that. Turner held true to things that the show had established 20 years ago, and as opposed to feeling like a hindrance, keeping continuity actually gave the writers opportunities to continue these pre-existing stories in ways that felt natural.
Here, just take a peek at this.
1986? Oh no, and I thought we'd be able to get home.
Your planet survived the attack.
When did it happen?
1986.
Next year? That's almost now.
But forget about continuity for a second. What I really don't get is people who argue that episodes don't even have to have functioning internal logic, like as if plot holes or contrivances don't take away from the story in any way. If Doctor Who were Monty Python, I'd understand the argument, but the writers clearly want us to take many parts of these stories seriously. Is this a goofy show? Yes. But it's difficult to actually become invested in a story that contradicts itself. So, those are my criteria for judging these episodes. We can finally move on to the 60th anniversary specials. Thank fuck. Now that the dust has settled on these episodes, I think it's time to look through them in detail and try to gather whether they were the show's salvation or if history is doomed to repeat itself. After that, we'll take a peek behind the scenes to see how the show got to this point. So, without any further ado, The Star Beast opens with a somewhat awkward recap of Series 4, voiced by David Tennant as he floats in space.
Once upon a time, Lord, I had a best friend. Donna saved the entire universe by taking the power of the Time Lords into her mind. She had to forget everything she ever knew, because if Donna ever remembers me, she will die.
I genuinely thought this was a trailer until the episode transitioned into the opening titles.
The story hasn't ended yet.
This opening is so stilted and awkward that the director of the episode was quick to disown it on Twitter. Good sign. So then the episode actually starts, and for the first time we see the 14th Doctor exit his TARDIS. Not including that one Children in Need special that was a thing. And personally, I found this scene to be a little jarring, considering the last we saw of the 14th Doctor was complete and utter confusion and bewilderment as to why his face came back.
What? But now this face has come back. Why?
I found it a bit odd how jovial and comfortable he seemed at the beginning of this story. Even if the implication was supposed to be that he's been traveling for some time before this episode takes place, just imagine this from the perspective of someone binging through the show. They wouldn't watch the Children in Need special, they'd go straight from The Power of the Doctor into this, and it just wouldn't flow very well. Oh, and this isn't related to anything, but if you take out the happy music from this scene, it looks like the Doctor is extremely drunk. So after sauntering around, he runs into Donna, and it's here we get our first good joke of the episode.
Thank you very much. Oi!
We learn that Donna now has a daughter named Rose, because even after all these years, Russell T Davies still cannot resist referencing Rose at any possible opportunity.
Rose!
What?
Rose!
What?
Rose!
Rose is also trans, which factors heavily into this episode's story, but we'll just put a pin in that for now. Throughout the episode, we learn what's happened to Donna over the years, and how her subconscious has tried to fill the gap left by the Doctor in her life.
Sometimes I think there's something missing. Like I had something lovely, and it's gone.
While this is happening, an adorable alien named the Meep seemingly crashes on Earth and presents itself to Rose.
Please be my friend.
Anyone familiar with Doctor Who comics will recognize this as Beep the Meep. Yes, that is its name. It's one of those characters that falls under the cute, adorable, mysterious creature that turns out to be evil or extremely dangerous trope. The Meep we see in this episode is no exception, as it's revealed to be evil in a shocking twist.
Now to hell with this!
Meaning the Doctor and Donna must work together to stop the Meep from destroying London.
The whole of London town burnt as fuel.
But that's 9 million people.
They did a great job bringing Beep the Meep to the big screen, cuteness and all.
It's overwhelming, really.
Your brains came up with the Meep.
Though personally, I'm not a huge fan of the Meep's cartoony evil face in the latter half of the episode after the twist is revealed. This might just be my weird taste, but I think they should have kept the Meep looking adorable while trying to destroy London. I think watching an innocent-looking teddy bear thing try to kill millions of people would have been less cliche and more funny. But also, remember, the only reason the Meep is acting like this is because apparently it was driven insane by the sun.
The story of the Meep is a tragic tale. The sun went mad.
A psychedelic sun.
Its radiation mutated all of Meep kind.
So it's not like the Meep is actually evil, it's just a little brainwashed, which makes it a bit weird that they send it to prison forever at the end instead of getting it the medical attention it needs, but whatever. I'm glad that the Meep was well received and not overshadowed by any mass media controversies.
Are you he or she or they?
My chosen pronoun is the definite article.
Fucking pronouns!
Did a Dalek exterminate all common sense from the new series of Doctor Who?
So what did I think of the episode all in all? Well, I'll be blunt here, I don't love this one so much. But that being said, there are still, of course, positives. Characters talk like human beings again.
You have a kid, and then she grows up into this extraordinary, beautiful thing, and you think, where the hell did she come from? How lucky am I? Don't you, Mum? Oh!
That might seem like a low bar, but after the last few seasons, it is a breath of fresh air.
I do not want this baby. I can't be a dad.
Hey, starting now. You're gonna give him life. You're gonna bring a person into being. Mate, that is epic.
Me and you're beautiful as your unborn child.
The humor also feels a little less forced than it used to.
The Wi-Fi's gone off. Everything's gone off. No Wi-Fi, no phone signal, it's all down.
Not even Netflix.
What do we do? Suppose we'll have to have a conversation. What?
I had to hold myself back here. There are so many examples of bad Chibnall dialogue that I could pretty much fill the entire video with it.
Eat my salad.
I think some of what makes this episode feel more natural than a Chibnall one is the blocking. Blocking is how characters move around a scene, and in this episode it feels very natural. Characters talk as they do stuff. A common issue with Chibnall scenes, for me at least, is that characters don't really move around, they just kind of stand in formation as they chit-chat, and it makes everything feel very unnatural. There are noticeable parallels between the sense of humor in The Star Beast and that of Series 1.
You got a cat?
No. Just get strays. They're coming off the estate.
The special effects and editing are noticeably improved from the Chibnall era, and I think all the actors involved did a splendid job. I think the directing is pretty good as well. Some of the shots in the episode are full-on color coordinated like it's a Wes Anderson flick. Look at all that blueness. However, I'm sorry to say it, but that's kind of where the positives end for me. I feel like this episode really struggles in a few key departments, namely its story. So the Doctor runs into Donna by chance and naturally tries to get away from her, because if you recall, she will die if she remembers him.
Donna took the mind of a Time Lord into her head. I had to wipe her memory to save her life. If she ever remembers me, she will die.
However, once the story really kicks into gear, the Doctor drops any pretense of even trying to be careful around Donna anymore.
You got two hearts.
So do I.
You've got what? No, he means it like a metaphor, like two minds, don't you?
This is a sonic screwdriver, and if it's good at one thing, it's resonating concrete.
What are you doing, man? At this point in the story, you're supposed to be convinced she'll die if she remembers you. Why is he suddenly so blasé about everything? I'm not bringing this up in an attempt to highlight a plot hole, but rather because I think this is out of character for the Doctor. I can't imagine him putting anyone he cares about as much as Donna in danger just because it's convenient. What's funny is that last time Donna appeared in the Whoniverse, it was under basically the exact same circumstances. It was in The End of Time, the last episode of Russell T Davies' first era. And in that episode, Donna is so sensitive to being reminded of the Doctor and everything she saw on her travels that she has to be effectively shielded from any potentially triggering stimuli. I suppose a long passage of time has occurred, but seeing the Doctor exercise literally zero caution around her until the end of the episode when he suddenly starts caring again.
Let me help.
No, you can't get involved.
Doesn't really sit right. It feels like the Doctor is only acting like this because the plot needs him to, not necessarily because it's what he would actually do. That kind of leads me to a bigger point I wanted to make about this episode. Things just kind of happen, and the plot ends up feeling a little arbitrary. Apparently the Doctor can do this with his screwdriver now. When did he have time to install these upgrades? It's implied that not a whole lot of time has passed since he regenerated.
That says Grand Mistress.
Catch up.
So why has he never used this extremely overpowered ability before, or for that matter, again after this? Good question. Why does he even have his own sonic screwdriver? Why not just give him the 13th Doctor's sonic? He's only in 3 episodes. I don't know, just kind of just going through the motions at this point. At one point in the episode, the Meep destroys a good portion of London. But when the Doctor and Donna abort the Meep's launch, the streets just reform themselves.
Ignition reverse.
Can the ground do that? I don't think the ground can do that. Let's just pivot the conversation back to Donna for a second though. Near the end of the episode, the Doctor is forced to give Donna back her memories in order to save the day, thinking it will kill her in the process.
Because you and I can stop this shit, but it will kill you.
For reference, the Doctor and Donna are on a spaceship that they have to disable somehow. Because the ship has very normal design, when the Doctor's in the middle of his work, a glass divider comes down separating him from the controls he needs to dingle-dangle in order to abort the ship's launch. So at this point, in my mind, the next logical step would presumably be to dictate to Donna what buttons she needs to press. And to be fair, he does try that.
Let me help.
Switches, the top ones, the blue ones.
But then he kind of just gives up and goes for the nuclear option instead.
Barrow, dance, Mexico.
But why? It's not like he couldn't have just kept dictating to her what he needed to do. I suppose if you want to play devil's advocate, you could argue that since they're pressed for time, dictating what to do wouldn't be fast enough, but I don't know if I buy that, especially since the Doctor spends 2 full minutes moping about having to kill Donna before he actually does it.
I think all that coincidence was heading here. Because you and I can stop this shit, but it will kill you.
Okay.
You'll die.
Who cares about me?
I do.
I just no.
No, you are not. Why does it have to be this?
I don't know, Doctor. Why does it have to be this? Can't you just keep telling her what to do? And once the Doctor does give Donna her knowledge back, she only has to flip like 3 switches to save the day.
I will triple drive the particle manifesto, overstep the umbilical feed. The hyperpage!
3, 2.
Would that really have taken too long to dictate to her? I know I'm being a little nitpicky here, but considering the emotional weight this scene is supposed to hold, I really think it should have felt as if the Doctor had no other options, that this was the only way. But it doesn't. This scene just kind of left me feeling confused during a moment that was clearly supposed to be heartbreaking. So they save the day and then she seemingly dies. Until it's revealed she's actually okay.
You're not dead.
Because she had a child, which split the power of the metacrisis between them.
Too much power for one person, but you had a child, and the metacrisis passed down.
Watching this scene awoke memories in me of watching The End of Time. And yes, I am going to be comparing these specials to the old episodes a lot throughout this video, so brace yourselves. Throughout The End of Time, the Doctor goes on and on about how Donna will die if she remembers him, and it's imperative that she be kept safe.
Just go to her now, go on, just run across the street, go up and say hello.
If she ever remembers me, her mind will burn and she will die.
And yet, near the beginning of part 2, she does remember him, but she doesn't die. Instead, she kind of bursts. Yet the moment is still played as if Donna dies so that the audience will be shocked.
What did I...
Donna? What was that? Donna? Donna, are you there?
Until the Doctor says this.
Do you think I'd leave my best friend without a defense mechanism? She's all right, she's fine, promise. She'll just sleep.
So I guess Donna actually was safe the whole time because of something the Doctor did off screen that we as an audience never knew about, and there was never any real danger. And the reason why the Doctor was going on about how she'd die if she remembered him when he knew that actually wasn't true is somewhere in Russell T Davies' head, but it didn't make it into the script. As much as I've commonly praised Russell's era, I've never made it a secret how much I dislike The End of Time. A perfect example of when camp becomes cringe. It's moments like these that are only there for shock value, even though they make literally no sense, that really bug me. And what do you know, the Star Beast does the exact same thing. Throughout the episode, the Doctor goes on about how if Donna remembers him, she'll die.
If she ever remembers me, she will die. If Donna ever remembers me, she will die.
And then she does remember him, and she's fine. To be fair, at the very least, the Doctor didn't actually know she'd be fine this time, so this would have been tense for him. But unfortunately, it wasn't tense for me as a viewer, because all I could think about during the scene was the defense mechanism that The End of Time sets up, which this episode never acknowledges, by the way. Is that not still in play? Does that only work once? This is never clarified, so I was unsure whether Donna was actually in any danger this whole time. Sure, the Doctor said she'd die, but he's already lied about this once.
She will die.
What happened?
She's all right, she's fine, promise.
This is a classic case of fool me once, I'm a little annoyed. Fool me twice, you've ruined all the dramatic tension of your scene. And all for the sake of generating shock value. What was the point of this random fake out? Was she just pretending to be dead because she thought it would be funny? Then again, maybe it's on me for expecting Doctor Who to actually follow through on killing off a character instead of just teasing it. We haven't had a companion actually die for real since Adric. This all dovetails into the other main issue I had with this episode, emotional impact. Donna's departure from the show in 2008 was my favorite departure of any Doctor Who character. It was heartbreaking but also bittersweet.
I can't go back. Don't make me go back.
Oh, Donna Noble, I am so sorry.
Donna didn't die, but she lost her memories of traveling the stars.
Goodbye.
No, please, no, no, no! No!
This meant that the sense of self-worth she had developed over the course of the season was gone, and she would be forced to return to the same old mundane, repetitive life she had once known before running into the Doctor.
Donna, I was just going.
Yeah, see ya. I'll tell you what though, you're wasting your time with that one.
It was the cost she paid for saving the world, and she wouldn't even remember making it.
I just want you to know that there are worlds out there, safe in the sky because of her. They will never forget her. Well, she can never remember.
But no matter what became of her, the Doctor would never forget her or what she did. Was this sad? Yes, very much so, but it was also a great end for Donna's character arc, bringing everything full circle, and it arguably said something deeper about how good people are often not rewarded for their sacrifices, a deeper theme of Series 4 and the specials. So fast forward to 2022 when it was announced Catherine Tate would reprise her role as Donna for the 60th, and you can imagine my concern. Russell had already brought her back once without restoring her memories. Would he really do it again? Well, we got our answer. No. And by reversing Donna's memory wipe, I really feel as if he dealt a blow to the effectiveness of the Series 4 finale, an episode he himself wrote. I went back and watched the end of that episode for this video, and it impacted me far less than it used to, knowing that in the grand scheme of things, all this will be undone, and she and Rose can simply expel the meta-crisis from their bodies at will.
We've still got to fix you two. That thing is wrapped around your cortex.
But there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
Just let it go.
I mean, really? We were mourning the loss of this character for 15 years and she could just expel it because girl power?
We know everything.
And you know nothing. It's a shame you're not a woman anymore. She'd have understood.
Yay, gender essentialism. Now, I'm pretty sure Russell was trying to be progressive here by inserting a feminist moment, but this scene bothers me because it's just so ridiculously easy. There are no stakes, no consequences for anything, and it's not only this. Rose being a product of the meta-crisis has no bearing on anything ultimately, aside from being a plot device that can save the day. It's established that apparently all the toys she makes are her way of trying to represent her memories of aliens.
The shed was her memory of the TARDIS. Every creature we met, she remembered as a toy. Exterminate!
Polo shall upgrade in progress.
Which on the face of it sounds like an interesting payoff to that plot thread, except that we never actually got to see any of these toys beforehand. They only appear for the first time during the climax, depriving the audience of having any chance of piecing this together for themselves. I think the closest any of the toys come to popping up before this is you can kind of see the Dalek one, I think, at this point, but it's barely visible. Why cover up the one part of the shed that actually looks like the TARDIS with a sign so that no one can figure out what it's supposed to be? Imagine how much more satisfying this could have felt if it had been woven into the story all along. If there had been little moments when Rose seemed to act like the Doctor, or we'd caught some glimpses of these toys that looked like Cybermen, then it would have felt like all these clues fell into place during the climax, and audience members would have been like, oh, I see it now.
It was always there.
But Russell didn't do this because he just wanted the moment to be shocking and didn't want there to be any chance audience members would predict it, which makes it feel random and unearned when it's established. And this all leads me to the final part of the Star Beast I'd like to talk about. Rose. I think it's worth stating that Yasmin Finney did a great job with the material she was given, and I feel sorry for her owing to all the harassment she's had to put up with since this episode aired. This episode was clearly meant to be a trans allegory in many ways, and I commend Russell for shining a light on these issues, but I must say, I think he made some errors in how he approached it. And yes, I am speaking as someone who is not trans personally, but then again, neither is Russell. There's a heavy implication that the reason Rose identifies as trans is because of the meta-crisis energy inside her. In this episode's most cringeworthy moment, we flash between Donna saying binary and Rose saying non-binary.
Binary. Non-binary. Binary.
How did he think that was a good idea, man? And apparently, because the Doctor is neither male nor female, and the Doctor was inside Rose,
That's what she said!
That made Rose neither male nor female.
We are binary.
She's not, because the Doctor's male and female.
And neither. And more.
Okay, wait. Doesn't it kind of cheapen the whole trans representation to imply that the only reason this character is trans is because of timey-wimey sci-fi shit? I don't think the best representation for a minority group is when they're only there to be a plot device.
It becomes a vital part of the plot that Rose contains the he and the she and the neither and the both.
And for the sake of being generous, maybe this isn't what Russell meant. Maybe the idea is that the meta-crisis is supposed to be a metaphor for being trans, and it didn't influence Rose's identity at all, but rather the other way around. But even if this was his intention, the way he wrote it kind of accidentally ends up implying that this is not the case.
We are binary.
She's not, because the Doctor's male and female.
It's the same thing with that line about the Doctor not getting how to dispel the meta-crisis energy because he's a male-presenting Time Lord.
We've got all that power, but there is a way to get rid of it. Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
I'm sure Russell's heart was in the right place, but he ends up going against his own message with this line. I thought the whole point of the episode was to be pro-trans and to say it doesn't matter what body you're born in, you can be whoever you want. And yet they immediately undercut this by insinuating the Doctor doesn't have the emotional intelligence to understand how to dispel his own powers because he has a penis.
It's a shame you're not a woman anymore.
I mean, sure, you could argue it's just a little offhand quip from Donna and Rose, and they're just teasing him, but considering there's no other explanation provided for how Donna and Rose suddenly know how to get rid of this thing, it's kind of all we have to go on. A counter-argument I've seen employed by some writers and defenders of this style, including Russell himself, is that the social messaging is more important than the story itself, so if the story has to take a hit for the sake of the messaging, so be it. And look, I'm not going to argue that real-world problems are less important than the consistency of the silly sci-fi show's writing. But I reject the idea that you can't tell a story with good social messaging that's also a good story in and of itself. Why does the quality of the writing have to take a hit for the sake of the messaging? In my experience, great social messaging, when written correctly, can make the story better. I know because I've seen it before in Doctor Who. Also, I'm just gonna be petty and throw it out there that canonically Rose's age doesn't make any sense. This episode is set in 2023 and she's stated to be 15.
Rose is a 15-year-old girl.
And yet the last time we saw Donna was canonically in the spring of 2010 and she didn't have a kid yet. In fact, she wasn't even pregnant. So for her to have a 15-year-old daughter in 2023, something ain't adding up here, Chief.
Sack Russell T. Davies.
We also get to see a new TARDIS interior in this episode.
This is amazing!
I don't have any strong thoughts on it really, apart from the fact that this is undeniably the most Teletubbies the TARDIS has ever looked. Take that as you will. All in all, though it had its moments, The Star Beast is a deeply flawed episode that doesn't do the best job of kicking off Doctor Who's 60th birthday. Will the next special fare better? Let's find out. We are now jumping from my least favorite special of the lot to my favorite, because Wild Blue Yonder is kind of a banger. This is the episode that convinced me that under the right circumstances, Russell still has it in him. It is a genuinely good time from start to finish. There are no contrivances, no retcons, no lore dumps. Mostly.
I saw it. The flux.
No, nothing other than pure, uncut Doctor Who wackiness.
How many knees?
2.
2 in total? Or 2 on each leg?
The setting of this episode is a remote spaceship at the edge of reality itself. The spaceship seems to be completely abandoned apart from a suspiciously slow robot.
Stay there, Jimbo. No sudden moves.
And can I just say, I've always loved Who episodes that take place in a quiet, abandoned location, now completely deserted. It gives the episode a slightly eerie, melancholy feel, especially when the writers feed us little tidbits about what caused its downfall.
Those are the colonists.
The colonists aren't here yet. This is the setup team. The skeleton crew.
Why did
I also think this setting makes for an especially good mystery. Why is there nobody here? And this episode takes full advantage of its mysterious setting. The entire episode essentially revolves around the Doctor and Donna slowly learning more about the base they've crash landed in, why it's empty, and how this information can help them defeat the Not Things. Yes, this episode complements its mysterious setting with even more mysterious antagonists.
Joel.
The Not Things do not originate from our universe.
Did you come from outside?
We came from the nothing.
We are not things.
All they know of our world is what they can observe, and so they try to copy it, to limited success.
The arms are so very difficult.
So we have an abandoned space station, a fake Doctor, a fake Donna, and a mysterious lack of crew members. I mean, there's potential for action, hijinks, fake-outs, and a compelling mystery at the heart of it all. And does this episode deliver on its potential? Honestly, yes. Yes, it does. This episode was unapologetically weird and stands out from the rest of the specials like a sore thumb, and I love it for that. After all, being weird and fantastical is what sets Doctor Who apart from other sci-fis, so in my opinion, it should own it. Everything I would have wanted to see from this setting is realized, especially the fake-outs. The episode really milks that.
Doctor, come back! She's not me! You've got the wrong one!
Russell really takes advantage of the fact that the antagonists look exactly like the protagonists. The best example of this is how they're introduced. It'll take the audience a few minutes to notice that something's off. You see, an episode written by a less competent Doctor Who writer probably would have shown us the Not Things scheming before they ever encountered the Doctor and Donna, thus depriving the audience of their surprise reveal. One thing Chris Chibnall liked to do as head writer a lot was show the villain just sort of farting around before they ever interacted with the Doctor to provide the audience with necessary background information. And whilst I understand why he did that, I think it was kind of a mistake. Take a look at Flux. We follow around the villains of that episode for a while before they even come face to face with the Doctor. But it doesn't really add much to the episode, it just kind of muddles an already overly confused narrative, and sprinkles in some cringe for good measure.
Trick or treat, Doctor.
This means that we frequently know more about the villain than the Doctor does upon their first meeting, which means we're not really learning about them as a character through the Doctor's eyes. In this episode, Russell takes a different approach. He only allows the audience to know as much as the Doctor does, so as the Doctor pieces together the mystery, so does the audience, and I think this approach works a lot better, especially in a setting like this, where it can be used to generate real surprise and tension. I also love how the Doctor uses the Not Things lack of knowledge of our world as a weapon against them, especially when he tricks them into thinking superstitions are real in this universe by drawing a line of salt.
In our universe, it is said that vampires, demons, and ghosts cannot cross a line of salt until they've counted every single grain.
You're lying.
Then walk towards me. Stop copying and make your own minds up!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
This episode is bonkers, and the mystery of what happened to the ship's pilot is at the center of it all. Solving that mystery ends up being key to defeating the Not Things, tying everything together nicely. Long ago, the ship's captain sacrificed herself so that the Not Things wouldn't be able to finish the process of duplicating her. In doing so, she left nothing behind but a robot, and her reasoning for doing so is actually kind of genius. The Not Things are receptive to any observable stimuli or change in their environment, making them extremely difficult to kill, as they'll learn how you think and anticipate your moves before you even make them. So by leaving nothing behind but an incredibly rudimentary and slow robot, and giving it the command to self-destruct the station, the captain was able to outsmart them by leaving her final move in plain sight. After all, they only know how to copy people, they can't account for an inanimate object that hardly ever moves. This is what I think Doctor Who episodes should be: wacky, conceptual, experimental, and at their core, a genuinely interesting mystery.
At the edge of creation.
That's an airlock door that opened 3 years ago and closed.
Throw in a running joke where the Doctor and Donna accidentally pervert human history, changing the word gravity to mavity.
The gravity of the situation!
What was that delightful word? Mavity.
Caught in the gravity field.
Caught in the what?
Mavity field.
And the Doctor's reunion with Wilf after all this time.
Hello, me old soldier. I never thought I'd see you again.
And you have yourself a truly peak episode. And on the topic of Wilf, anyone who's following the development of these specials would be aware that he was originally going to play a larger role, but as fate would have it, he tragically passed away after only filming this scene, which makes it one of the most haunting but also touching scenes in all of the specials.
If we wanted to do more, because we love him, he wasn't well enough to do more, but that one scene he completed fills me with absolute joy. It's pure Bernard. I am so glad we got to shoot that, because it's one of the great joys of my entire life that I got to work with that man. I love him.
And on the topic of revisions, this episode seems to have been heavily altered from its original state. Just from a glance at the original version of the script, back when it was titled The Bridge, we can see that there was a scene near the opening, likely of the Doctor and Donna in the TARDIS, that was later cut. And I think that was for the best, because that would have really bogged down the pacing. In fact, this script is the only one of the four that I would say truly feels polished. Now, even after dishing out all of this praise, I must admit, this episode still isn't perfect. Some of the logic is a tad convenient, and the VFX does struggle to keep up in places.
Auntie Iris, Mummy and Daddy, why does he travel with someone as stupid as you?
I think there's a big missed opportunity in this episode's narrative, that being that this should have been where the TARDIS got its new interior, not at the end of the last episode. Personally, I found it a bit weird when the TARDIS just changed spontaneously at the end of the Star Beast. I know that it's become a tradition for every new Doctor to have a new TARDIS.
Oh, you sexy thing.
but in universe, there's no actual reason provided for why it changed. Especially if we're supposed to believe that the 14th Doctor's been traveling around for a little bit before the episode takes place, which I'm still kind of unclear on. Every time the TARDIS has gotten a new interior in the past, it was because it was destroyed, and the TARDIS being destroyed is a key part of this episode's story. I think it would have worked really well if, at the end of the episode, when the Doctor and Donna are reunited with the TARDIS, it's rebuilt itself. Because as it's currently written, it feels like the TARDIS only changes because it's self-aware that there's a new showrunner in town. Dare I say it, but I think this is one case where Chibnall actually did it better. At the beginning of his era, the TARDIS is destroyed in the most epic fashion yet, and the Doctor is separated from it for 2 whole episodes before eventually being reunited with it, which really draws out a viewer's anticipation and makes the reveal feel bigger and more meaningful. Yes, I did just use something Chibnall wrote for Doctor Who as an example of something I like. Don't get used to it. On the topic of Chibnall, I'm also really not a fan of how this episode doubles down on the Timeless Child retcon. I think everyone was kind of hoping RTD would ignore it, like how everyone ignored the movie's retcon that made the Doctor half human. Even Chibnall said that he expected RTD to ignore it, but he didn't.
You don't know where you're from.
How'd you know that?
The positive aspect to these scenes is that, at the very least, they add some much-needed emotional weight to certain Chibnall plotlines like the Flux. If you watched Series 13, firstly, my condolences, but secondly, you'll remember that the Doctor accidentally set a chain of events in motion that destroyed, like, half of the entire known universe. It was called the Flux, and to a large extent it was the Doctor's fault.
The flux wasn't an accident. It wasn't a naturally occurring event. It was made, it was placed because of you.
And yet, she seemed surprisingly unfazed by this fact. You'd think something like this would bear massive emotional consequences for someone as self-conscious as the Doctor. I mean, you all remember how long it took him to get over the Time War, and that was less people dying than the Flux. And yet, we barely get any indication that this has affected the Doctor on a deep level. One second we're getting scenes of millions of people getting erased from existence, and the next we're getting the Doctor wisecracking.
Our savior.
I always wondered what time would look like. Way to play to your ego. Nice look. I fancy that coat. Oh, I get how that ego appeal thing works now.
It would be one thing if we saw how this actually affected the Doctor, and there was some implication that this humor was just a way of deflecting the trauma, but that's not really in there. The last few scenes of Flux have such a happy-go-lucky, chummy tone to them, you wouldn't think that half the universe just got erased. I guess someone didn't grasp the mavity of the situation. There was a brief scene of emotional reflection at the end, but it doesn't have to do with the Flux, but rather the Doctor contemplating her past and whether or not she should try to find out more about it.
I was looking for information about me.
It's nice to see RTD actually trying to retroactively fix certain mistakes Chibnall made by showing how the Flux impacted the Doctor emotionally.
It destroyed half the universe because of me.
So yes, I keep running, of course I do. How am I supposed to look back on that? It wasn't your fault. I know!
But at the same time, personally, I think the best approach to dealing with the aftermath of Chibnall era plotlines is to just retcon them out of existence. But that's just me. Now, this episode was intentionally kept secret before transmission. Clips of it in the trailers and cast lists had a redacted text pasted over them, leading a lot of people to think that it was going to feature previous Doctors or companions, and I think a lot of people ended up being disappointed that it didn't.
I think everyone's expecting Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi and the ghost of William Hartnell riding on the back of the Garm. They're having a spaceship and they meet evil versions of themselves. That's it. That's it. This is so simple. That's why I kept it secret, but I wonder if that's had an unfortunate effect and made it disappointingly simple on its broadcast.
And that's a shame, because on its own merit, this is a pretty good episode. I would argue the best of the 4. This episode wasn't trying to do anything big or transformative. The episode preoccupied with that is So, the Giggle seems to be most people's favorite of the 4 specials, and I think I can understand why. It's fun.
We have the teddy bears and the Harvey horsen. Who does not want a Harvey horse and to go clip at the club down the Strasse, yeah?
Neil Patrick Harris was Interesting casting for the toy maker, but I think it paid off.
Every game is needing an audience, yeah.
I mean, he's a dance sequence to spice up your life. How could this episode not be A+? Well, I'm sorry if this makes me a hater, but nothing that happens in this episode makes any sense. The plot of the episode is essentially just that the toy maker wants to mess with the doctor, and he does that by messing with humanity, of course, by making them all go insane.
Everyone started thinking they're right, all the time. And they won't change their mind. If you try to argue, they go mad.
But actually, the insanity was inside us all along.
But it's not only the giggle. Don't go thinking you've got an excuse. All the anger out there on the street, the lies, the righteousness, that's human, that's you.
The script is stuffed with ideas from start to finish. What if everybody on Earth thought they were right all the time? What if the first ever TV broadcast was actually an encoded message planted by the toy maker? What if the toy maker could create pocket realms within our world that don't abide by the laws of physics? What if Mel from Trial of a Time Lord came back to Earth and got a job at Unit? What if the Doctor could duplicate himself into two doctors, for some reason, and then duplicate the TARDIS as well? What if... dance sequence. And what if there was a robot sidekick at Unit now?
An invention of the Blinks.
Hello, the Blinks.
This is all one episode? I've always thought the best Doctor Who episodes are the ones that really hone in on one idea and stick with it. Like Blink, Heaven Sent, Vincent and the Doctor, Midnight. All episodes that explore exactly one idea to its maximum potential. And the results speak for themselves. Look, I get that even this episode can't possibly compare to episodes like The Power of the Doctor in terms of overstuffedness, but just because it's an improvement doesn't mean it's not still necessarily a problem. The unfortunate result of cramming this many ideas into a single episode is that there simply isn't enough time to give everything a satisfactory explanation. Like, how is Mel here? The last time we saw her was in a completely different part of the universe in the year 2 million, so I guess she must have time traveled to get here.
So I got a lift off a Zingo and came back to Earth.
Oh, she caught a Zingo. Gotcha.
It's the thing you get a lift off.
How old would she even be by now, canonically anyways? Like 100? She says that she traveled with Sabalon Glitz until he died of old age at 101.
He lived till he was 101. What? Died falling over a whiskey bottle.
If they spent their entire lives together and he died at 101 at some point in her past, how is she still this young? Russell, my guy, you gotta keep track of characters' ages because it's just getting ridiculous at this point. I would have loved to see an episode that just dealt with Mel's return as a companion. Like, remember School Reunion in Season 2? That episode saw Sarah Jane Smith's return to Doctor Who, and the entire episode was focused around just that. This provided us with all kinds of great moments, like seeing what Sarah Jane had done with her life in the decades since leaving the Doctor.
Well, no harm in a little investigation while I'm here.
No, good for you.
Her reaction to seeing the TARDIS for the first time in decades.
Hello, Sarah Jane.
It's you. You've regenerated.
Yeah, half a dozen times since we last met.
How she had readjusted to life on Earth.
You know what the most difficult thing was? Coping with what happens next, with what doesn't happen next. You took me to the furthest reaches of the galaxy. You showed me supernovas. And then you just dropped me back on Earth. How could anything compare to that?
And how she had changed as a person since we'd last seen her. Conversely, Mel's inclusion in this episode ends up feeling like little more than window dressing. Yeah, you know, Mel, she's here. There she is in the background. She's part of Donna's family, I guess, now.
Oh, your family, darling. Sit down. Hey.
I mean, they're both redheads, so they're probably related. To give this episode the credit it deserves, though, it does fix an issue that was on display in the School Reunion, namely the fact that the writers felt it necessary to give Rose and Sarah Jane a stupid cat fight, just further pushing the sexist stereotype that anytime two women meet, they will immediately fight over a man.
Who's she?
Rose, Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane, Rose.
Your assistants are getting younger.
I'm not his assistant. Rats in school.
They dissect them. Or maybe you haven't reached that bit yet.
They haven't done that for years. Where are you from? The Dark Ages?
Anyway.
I saw things you wouldn't believe.
Try me.
Mummies.
I've met ghosts.
Robots. Lots of robots.
Slivine in Downing Street.
Daleks.
Met the Emperor.
He didn't mention me once.
Oh, mate. The missus and the ex. Welcome to every man's worst nightmare.
Seeing Donna and Mel get along is nice.
I wasn't the first redhead.
That was me.
They also made Melanie more of an actual character than she was in the 80s, so props to them for that.
And you can sort of put things a bit right, maybe, because when I was in it in the 80s, I was very sort of Fay Ray going, monsters! You know, didn't really have anything. And I was a computer programmer, which was sort of quite ahead of its time as such. Never went anywhere near anything remotely like a computer. So now I have a desk, and I am in that office, you know, being what I need to be.
I'm not against the idea of an episode that has a lot going on. In fact, I'm all for it, but it's a high-risk, high-reward strategy. If you want to try writing an episode like that, it's vital that no matter how many ideas are shoved into the plot, each one of them gets the opportunity to be fully realized, and unfortunately, in this episode, I can't say they are. I wanted to see more of how the world was functioning when everybody thought they were right. We get a brief glimpse of it, but then it feels like the episode just kind of burns the idea and swiftly moves on from it without ever really mining it for its potential. I would have loved to see how the Giggle affects characters we've come to know based on their specific personalities, not just random extras. The closest the episode comes to showing us this is one single moment where Kate is affected by the Toymaker's transmission.
Busy day?
Why do you want to know?
I'm just asking.
It's an invasion of my privacy. In fact, it's an assault on my civic rights.
But it's resolved almost immediately and it doesn't really lead anywhere.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
After the 15-minute mark, it might as well not even be happening because it doesn't come up again that everyone on Earth is currently insane. Then they shoot a satellite and that's it. It's resolved.
And fire.
We did it! Success!
And knowing Doctor Who, I have a feeling that this massive apocalyptic event in human history will never be mentioned again. This plotline had so much potential.
What do we do this time, Doctor? How do we fight the human race?
And it just wasn't really used. Instead, we get a fairly anticlimactic ending where the Doctor challenges the Toymaker to a game of catch.
Name your challenge, Doctor.
You said it. The first game ever. The ball.
And then beats him at a game of catch. And that's how he saves the day.
Not fair.
I'm still confused on how the godlike Toymaker was unable to win a game of catch, but I guess it's been a while since he practiced. Oh, and I noticed while editing this that you can see in a few shots the Doctor already holding the ball before he's supposed to catch it, but you know what? I'll let it slide because I'm merciful. So pretty much no one likes this ending scene except for people who really like watching Ncuti Gatwa jump around without pants on. So presumably Russell T Davies. Given all the build-up and intrigue surrounding the Toymaker, I think most people assumed that in order to defeat him, the Doctor would have to do something clever, trick him in some way. The last time we saw the Toymaker, the Doctor tricked him by imitating his voice so that some sentient board game pieces would move in such a way as to blow up his realm at the exact moment he dematerialized his TARDIS so that he could escape. It's a weird episode. But even there, the Doctor's solution took more thinking than here. Is there a way this ending could be rewritten to involve the themes that the episode actually sets up before this point? I think so. Let's return to the theme of tribalism that the episode kind of juggles and then drops.
All the anger out there on the street. That's human, that's you. Using your intelligence to be stupid.
I think this would be an excellent point to bring that back. So let's rewind a little bit. Remember the scene where they shot down the satellite and freed humanity from the Giggle? Remove that scene. Make it so the Giggle is still in full effect during this climax, adding more tension. Remember how it was set up earlier in the episode that it's possible to disable the inhibitor bracelets, keeping everyone at unit sane? Well, in my version of the scene, the second the Doctor got the ball into his possession, he would have lifted his sonic and disabled the ZDX bracelet before throwing the ball to one of the soldiers. Yes, in my version of the scene, it wouldn't be the Doctors versus the Toymaker, but rather humanity versus the Toymaker, because the second humanity was in possession of the ball, they were never going to give it up. Because of the Toymaker's own actions, every single person at unit would start going crazy trying to win the game. And the ball would pass from person to person to person, eventually working its way through the entire building and down onto the streets below, and the Toymaker would never get it back again. And remember, the Toymaker can't quit in the middle of a game. As long as the game was still going, he'd be stuck on Earth with the Doctors unless he forfeited, meaning the Doctor would have weaponized the Toymaker's own plans against him to defeat him, and the theme of human tribalism would have actually played into the climax. But within the episode we actually got, all Russell really used the Giggle for was a means to generate extremely unsubtle political commentary.
They are using this to control us. I am anti-Z-Dex.
Why should I care about you?
No change there, then.
The only bit of political commentary in this episode that's even somewhat subtle is that I think the Toymaker might be a parallel for billionaires.
You can turn bullets into flowers. Think of the good you could do. So tell me why you don't.
But most of the commentary is extremely boomer.
That's the game of the 21st century. They shout, and they type, and they cancel.
Scream after scream after scream.
That's right. Your mom was right about those damn phones all along. They've been making you crazy. Via a secret sound being broadcast into everyone's brains since the dawn of television.
La 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 la.
Another tune.
What are the notes? C, E, G, C, G, E, C. I found the exact same notes.
That isn't CEGCGEC. It's clearly ACFCFEG. Is Russell tone deaf?
Sack Russell T Davies.
This isn't even the first time Doctor Who has done this.
Now that one. A perfect fifth.
No, Doctor, that isn't a perfect fifth. It's a perfect fourth. Get writers with better senses of pitch, BBC. Things only really get going once the Doctor and Donna head back in time to 1925, 17 minutes into the episode. And then the episode's great, but it only really lasts for another 30 minutes before everything's resolved, and then we get a padded out 15-minute ending sequence tying up all the episode's loose ends. There are so many happily ever after scenes at the end of this episode that it's like watching Return of the King all over again. Or perhaps more fittingly, it's like watching The End of Time all over again. This is unusual for Russell, but a lot of the dialogue in these ending scenes doesn't come off as very natural. It either seems like he's really trying to shove down your throat how happy of an ending this is,
I've never been so happy in my life.
or hit you over the head with a million lore references. At one point, the 14th and 15th Doctors have an exchange that is literally just lore references.
Put on trial, exiled, key to time, all the devastation of Logopolis. Adric. River Song, Sarah Jane, and Rose. But the Time War, Pandorica, Mavic Chen, the gods of Ragnarok.
Is this dialogue? Can this qualify as dialogue? It sounds more like they've challenged each other to a contest of who can name more Doctor Who trivia.
Bo, the face of Bo!
Oh, and in regards to lore dumps, this episode bedevils its audience with mystery box setups.
There's only one player I didn't dare face. The one who waits. Who's that? That's someone else's game.
All of the specials do this, and if I'm being honest, I think the show has become kind of over-reliant on mystery boxes at this point.
Just wait till I tell the boss.
Cryptic. I hate that.
But this is far from being my biggest gripe with how the episode is written. In particular, the trend of things just kind of happening inexplicably continues with the Doctor bi-generating.
Here we go again.
How did that happen?
Bi-generation. I have bi-generated.
Despite how controversial this moment has proven to be, I don't actually have an issue with the idea itself. Doctor Who is a wacky show, it deserves wacky ideas. However, it would have been nice if there was some kind of explanation for why this happened. Like it all. It's that formalist writing style I talked about earlier. Russell was clearly prioritizing the themes and ideas of this episode above its plot. I mean, it's possible Russell will retroactively explain this come series 14. I mean, season 1. But that's up in the air now, and either way, I think something this big should have been explained right away. With the information we currently have, all we can assume as audience members is that this just spontaneously happens to Time Lords sometimes. But we've never seen or heard about it before. But it happens, though.
Bi-generation, we discover, is an ancient myth of the Time Lords. Actually, I've had this idea for years. I've always wanted the Doctor to talk to his new version. Imagine how much fans love new things and will really rejoice when this happens.
Considering the Doctor was fighting against the reality-bending celestial toymaker, I would have bet my bottom dollar going into the scene that he was behind it. But no, the toymaker was just as shocked by this as everyone else.
What?
There was a perfect, logical explanation for why the Doctor's regeneration went wacky that Russell could have used, and he just didn't. The toymaker also could have been the explanation behind why the 10th Doctor's face came back, or why his clothes regenerated with him. But as it stands, neither of those things are explained either. I have seen some people say that this happened because a strong theme of Russell's second era is fantasy and mythology. It is described as an ancient myth of the Time Lords, so maybe after the Doctor drew the line of salt, he somehow summoned myths into reality.
There's no such thing. Bi-generation is supposed to be a myth, but...
Look at me.
If that's really what the explanation was supposed to be, I don't think it's very well conveyed, nor do I think it's very compelling, but I doubt that's what Russell was going for. I think Russell's reasoning for why this happened is that the Doctor's very damaged right now.
I got a glimpse inside your mind, and it's like you're staggering. Maybe that's why your old face came back.
And needed to undergo some form of therapy by duplicating himself.
I'm fine because you fix yourself. We're Time Lords. We're doing rehab out of order.
But come on, he's been way more damaged than this before, and it never broke his regeneration cycle like this. That being said, from a thematic perspective, I do like exploring the idea that the Doctor's adventures have taken a toll on him and he needs to take a break. I just think the specials could have done a better job of showing us that through the Doctor's actions rather than repeatedly telling us that. Because apart from the moment when he angrily bangs a wall, he seems pretty normal. I know I'm being a nitpicking Nelson, but I still have one more point to make. Russell seems to be reusing old ideas in this episode a lot. Something about the Doctor getting shot through the chest by one of his oldest foes and then having a fake-out regeneration that results in him duplicating himself kind of rings a bell. Almost as if I've seen it before.
I'm regenerating.
Oh, also something about one of the Doctor's former companions getting their very own copy of David Tennant to live a quiet life with seems oddly familiar.
I've only got one life. Rose Tyler. I could spend it with you.
I also can't help but feel as if I've already seen an episode in which the bad guy hijacks Earth's satellites and uses them to subliminally mind control everyone on Earth by use of a rhythm that's beamed into all of their heads, without them even knowing it's there.
What's the Archangel network?
I've got Archangel. Everyone's got it.
It's in the phones. There it is. That rhythm is everywhere. Ticking away in the subconscious.
It's not like the old Archangel network.
Same goes for the Master's remains being recovered by an unknown hand with red painted fingernails. Okay, to be fair, I think that last one might be a reference, but either way, it's still following in line with a very common trend. Even the Toymaker's dance sequence couldn't help but remind me of something else Russell has already written. Those examples weren't cherry-picked from across his entire run, they all came from just 2 stories he wrote. It's true that Doctor Who is a humongous show. Inevitably, ideas are going to be reused. I mean, basically every classic Who serial ever was filmed in a quarry, so repetition isn't anything new. That being said, if you're going to rehash an idea you've already done, I would argue it needs some kind of new spin. If you guys recall, I complained about Chibnall copying ideas RTD had already done back in 2020, so the last thing I expected to see upon RTD's return was for him to also rip off old RTD stories. But alas. You know, I've been fairly critical, so let's end with some positives, because there are definitely things to like about this episode. Most of the episode's positives have to do with the Toymaker, if you hadn't already guessed. He is such a fun villain, and whenever he's on screen, it's impossible not to enjoy yourself.
That is the final ball of all. Yeah.
The entire sequence when the Doctor and Donna are trapped in his realm is great. It's some of the most experimental and conceptual imagery the show's offered up in years, and like I said, experimental and conceptual is exactly what I think a limitless show such as this should strive to be. So risk-taking episodes like this will always have my respect, even if, as an episode, it's far from perfect. I'm still not sure how I feel about there now being 2 doctors sharing the same universe. At least the last one didn't have a TARDIS, was human, and stuck in a parallel universe. Part of me wonders if the only reason he had the Doctor duplicate himself and gave that Doctor a spare TARDIS is because that's something he wanted to do the last time the Doctor duplicated himself, but for whatever reason the scene didn't make it to air.
And that was a big cut, this one, from episode 13. The Doctor giving the second Doctor the chance to grow his own TARDIS. Oh, we argued over this, and part of me still wishes it was in. Julie was right, though. It was just getting in the way of there's so many complicated endings and so many complicated emotions. So I like to imagine this still happened, though. So one day we'll come back and put this one back in.
So, after all these years, he's getting his way and finally giving an extra Doctor an extra TARDIS. Dreams do come true. And the new TARDIS has a ramp.
Wheelchair accessible.
At last, you finally caught up with the 21st century.
Which apparently was inspired by Doctor Who YouTuber Theories, which is cool for many reasons, but especially these 2. Reason 1, I've talked with Theories before and now I feel like I'm in the Doctor Who inner circle. And 2, this implies that Russell watches Doctor Who YouTubers. Russell, are you watching this right now? In terms of there being 2 Doctors now, I'm not necessarily against it as long as the idea is actually taken advantage of, and the 14th Doctor is brought back in some meaningful capacity, as opposed to the whole reason behind this being so that the 10th Doctor could get yet another happily ever after. Please tell me that this wasn't just for that reason. When I first watched this episode, it was my least favorite of the bunch, but after rewatching all the episodes, it's overtaken the Star Beast in my eyes for one simple reason. One Shooty-Gatwa-shaped reason. Oh my lord, he's so charismatic in this role.
This is the ladder into top floor!
I can tell right off the cuff that he's perfect casting for the Doctor, and I will admit, I was very skeptical when I first saw the announcement that the guy from Sex Education was going to be the next Doctor Who.
Oh, does it.
But hot damn, those misgivings have been thoroughly cast aside. The Church on Ruby Road is, in many ways, the most important of the 4 specials because it's basically meant to be the pilot to Doctor Who's new era. It's basically RTD's 2023 version of Rose, and there are a lot of parallels between the 2 episodes. The episode is initially told from the companion's POV. The Doctor is portrayed as being especially mysterious, and he wears a leather jacket. The new companion in question has a surprise encounter with him in which he saves her life. After this point, the Doctor keeps popping up in her life because she's now at the center of an alien threat to humanity, which culminates in someone important in her personal life getting kidnapped by aliens. Though she's initially frustrated with the Doctor for his blasé attitude, she quickly becomes fascinated with the mystery of who he is. The episode's antagonist takes a backseat to the building relationship of the 2 leads and ends up just being a blobby, lumpy guy who can't talk and just makes hissing noises. The episode ends with the companion leaving her loved ones behind and running into the TARDIS. Obviously, Rose and Ruby are somewhat similar, and I'm not just talking about them both being blondes that have a first name beginning with R. They're both characters who lack something important in their lives, and they find it through the Doctor. For the first 19 years of Rose's life, nothing happened, and then she met her uncle, the Doctor.
For the first 19 years of my life, nothing happened, and then I met a man called the Doctor.
Rob. Some of the parallels between the 2 episodes are definitely intentional. In fact, there are some outright homages in here. In the scene when the Doctor rescues Ruby from the Snowman of Death, does this building seem familiar at all? Because it should. It was that building. It was the Rose building. They did a really good job of renovating it after it blew up. And sure, it's true that Doctor Who is no stranger to reusing sets, but I don't think this one was a coincidence. So, with all these parallels in mind, does Ruby Road do as good a job as Rose of introducing a new era of the show? Well, that's a difficult question to answer for 2 reasons. One, I don't actually like Rose as an individual episode all that much because it feels fairly bland by today's Who standards, and also it has this hideous walking shot. And 2, the reason Rose feels bland by today's Who standards is because it effectively reinvented the wheel. The Who wheel. Everything about Rose, and Series 1 for that matter, was written to feel as different from Doctor Who's classic series as it possibly could. I suspect that, as a child, There were certain things Russell wanted to see in Doctor Who that it just wasn't delivering on, so when he finally had the reins, it was wish fulfillment time. Stories used to be long, slow, and dialogue heavy. Now they're short, fast, and more action-packed than ever. We used to see essentially nothing of the companions' lives and relationships outside of the TARDIS. Now their home lives are a core aspect of the show. There used to be no hanky-panky in the TARDIS, but now there is.
You telling me you do dance?
900 years old, me. I've been around a bit. I think you can assume at some point I've danced.
You?
Well, I've got the moves, but I wouldn't want to boast.
The Doctor always used to save the day at the end of each story, no strings attached. But now, if he isn't careful, by defeating the baddies, he might accidentally create a power vacuum by ousting the incumbent regime, opening the door for an even worse regime to take control, leading to a follow-up story a few episodes later where he has to confront his own mistakes.
Last time I was here, I put it right.
No, but that's when it first went wrong. All the news channels, they just shut down overnight.
I did that.
There was nothing left in their place. No information. The whole planet just froze. That was the start of it. 100 years of hell.
I made this world.
So yeah, Russell changed things up. Rose is to Doctor Who as Ocarina of Time is to 3D adventure games. It seems a bit bland today, but that's only because it set down the foundations that everything after it copied. The notable difference being that Ocarina of Time still holds up really well, and Rose is a tad aged. So when we look at the church on Ruby Road as a pilot to a new era of the show, I can't really pretend as if it's all that different from anything we've already seen. Apart from the fantasy and musical elements on display, which, I will admit,
that is a first.
This episode kind of just feels like more of the same. Ironically, even by today's standards, Rose still feels more risque in places, especially in how dark it makes the Doctor's character.
Look, if I did forget some kid called Mickey,
Yeah, it's not a
it's
kid.
because I'm busy trying to save the life of every stupid ape blundering about on top of this planet, all right?
Okay, so it's not exactly a bold new direction for the show. Whatever. It can still be a good episode on its own merits, right? Well, yes, it could have been, but it's kinda not. The story of the episode is that goblins are trolling Ruby. They target Ruby because there are a lot of coincidences in her life.
Hello, Ruby Sunday. And it's a Sunday right now. That's a coincidence.
And they like coincidences. They eat coincidences for breakfast. That and babies. Ruby doesn't know who her mom is, so she tries to turn to reality TV to give her the answers she desperately craves. Classic mistake.
You are the father.
But they're useless and the goblins make a Christmas tree fall on the show's host.
There is no trace of your mum or dad.
And next time,
The Doctor catches on to the fact that the goblins are messing with Ruby at some point off screen and starts stalking her to make sure she's okay. Fast forward a little bit and Ruby is babysitting. The goblins break into her house and take the baby so that they can eat it, as goblins do.
Do you know why they call them goblins? Because they like to gobble you up.
Leading to a chase sequence. Oh, did I say chase sequence? I meant song.
Cause the Goblin King, oh the Goblin King, it's so good to meet you, you great big thing.
The Doctor and Ruby manage to get their baby back, but as revenge, the goblins go back in time and eat Ruby as a baby.
Ruby? Where did she go? Who's Ruby? Your daughter.
Now the orphan children that Ruby helped raise are gone and the world is a worse place.
You fostered 33.
Don't be so stupid. That's too much like hard work. 800 quid per child.
Don't say that.
Really hammer it at home there.
I think you got me mixed up with someone else. Because there is no Ruby. It's just me, stuck with my old mum.
Yeah, I got it. She's miserable now.
Up here in the attic, and I'm busy. This little brat arrives ruining my holiday.
I am getting it, thank you.
Christmas Day, Mum's asleep by 3. And I'll be all on my own.
I too love subtlety. So the Doctor also goes back in time and stabs the Goblin King with a church spire. Because symbolism? And then the ship disappears and the Doctor catches baby Ruby. Would have been really awkward if the baby had been in a different part of the ship that wasn't directly over top of the Doctor. That would have been a big yikes. Oh, and I noticed while editing that, again, they cut the shot of him catching the baby wrong, so you can see that he was already holding it before he lowers his arms. You just have to cut a few more frames off, and it'll work. You're killing me here, editor. Then the Doctor sees Ruby's mysterious mom, but decides not to learn anything about who she is because he's a dick. 12 would not approve. So that's the plot of the episode, and if you couldn't tell from that summary, it's very goofy. I guess I'm just curious as to why Russell decided to make the launching pad to his new era this juvenile. It can be hard to even make sense of at points.
If you have lots of accidents, it stitches you in, it weaves you into the day, you become all complicated and knotted and vivid.
I've literally no idea what any of that means. The Teletubbies parallels don't just end at the TARDIS.
Tell us, who have you played before?
I'm Poe from the Teletubbies.
Look at that! Poe from Teletubbies, can you believe it? Unbelievable.
It's all connected. I suppose any of the plot's contrivances could be countered by the fact that the goblins love coincidences, so any coincidences in this episode's plot are intentional. But to me at least, a story that's reliant on fantasy, coincidences, and, let's be honest, random shit, feels a little overly juvenile even for Doctor Who standards. I mean, I know Doctor Who is a kid's show and all, but when people say that, what they really mean is that it's a family show. It's meant to appeal to all ages so the whole family can snuggle in and watch it on the telly together. This episode, however, feels like it's aiming at a really low age demographic, and I personally don't think that that was the best idea. If you recall, I had the same issue with the Chibnall era. Episodes had paper-thin concepts, live, laugh, love characters, and baby's first lessons to finish off an episode delivered almost patronizingly by the Doctor directly to the audience themselves.
On the 21st of December 1956, segregation on buses in Montgomery was ended.
It took so long though. Her whole life.
You want me to tell you that Earth's gonna be okay? Because I can't. Unless people face facts and change, catastrophe is coming. Tesla keeps on inventing, but no money, no fame. That's not right. People should know.
Doctor, who's that? It's John Lennon, and in 1980 he was shot outside his apartment building for no reason. That's so not cool. Shooting people's wrong. I agree with Ryan, shooting people is wrong. Many viewers above the age of 10 felt alienated by this, and even viewers under the age of 10 weren't watching because they were busy playing Fortnite, because at least Fortnite is fun. As we saw then, aiming the show exclusively at kids does not pay off in the long term. And even though this episode isn't quite as bad as the Chibnall era in this regard, I think the issue is still present. Look, I'll be the first to admit that I've always wanted Doctor Who to attempt something really out there, like a musical episode, specifically one in the style of Labyrinth.
Dance, magic dance, dance, magic dance.
Even though obviously they can't get David Bowie, but still. That's always been on my wish list, so the fact that we actually got an episode with singing goblins and a goblin king kind of makes me feel as if Russell has found a way to hack into my brain. But despite this, the episode's sheer level of cringe, combined with the fact that the music isn't actually all that good, sort of prevents me from enjoying the episode as much as I would have otherwise. And yes, I said it, the goblin song is bad. I can hear the autotune in every note. Send me your hate mail. Even beyond this, there are other aspects of this episode that kind of throw me off. I feel like the execution just isn't as good here as it was in prior episodes. The pacing, especially near the beginning, feels off. Like, we get a scene with Ruby encountering bad luck at an interview, and then we smash cut to another scene of her getting bad luck at a concert that lasts for like 20 seconds before we're hit over the head with another scene of her encountering bad luck at a club. And considering we don't even know this character yet, it doesn't really flow very well. It just feels like a barrage of information. One thing I put a lot of stock into is character introductions. After all, first impressions are everything. Something as small as the first shot a character appears in can color how an audience views them. Cake. Is this character powerful, mysterious, evil, innocent, intimidating, unassuming, or at least so the writers would like you to think? Bob's your uncle. I understand that Ncuti Gatwa does appear at the end of the Giggle, but based on my understanding, this is the episode that's supposed to be the jumping on point for new viewers, so a lot of people's first impression of the Doctor is going to be this. First he's watching her from afar, and then he's dancing in the bar she's in, and then he teleports over to her just in time to catch her drink. Look, I know he's a Time Lord and all, but how the fuck did he do that? And again, they edited the shot wrong, so you can see he was already holding the glass before he lowers his hand. This is just getting sloppy at this point, Now, for comparison, here's how the 9th Doctor was introduced in Rose. That was the perfect entrance for him as a character. I can't imagine any moment that could have thematically summed up their relationship better than that. Meanwhile, in this episode, the first time Ruby sees the Doctor is when he's dancing at a bar during a dance montage. Really? That's their first interaction? And then the Doctor makes things even worse by getting all creepy with her.
Does that happen to you a lot? Knocking things over?
I'm just clumsy.
No, you're not. It's worse than that. Merry Christmas.
I would run away immediately. I think the first time Ruby, and by extension us, saw the Doctor in this episode should have been when he caught her drink. It would have made for a much more meaningful and impactful entrance into the story as opposed to these awkward stitched-on shots of him standing somewhere. Why even bother showing him at all? He doesn't do anything, and I don't even know where he is relative to her because of the lack of establishing shots. It just feels really awkward and clunky. I understand that the point is to convey that the Doctor is watching over Ruby, but that could have been conveyed through subtext. Maybe you see the TARDIS in the background of one of the scenes, or some other subtle indicator the Doctor is there without literally showing him. Either way, it's already implied the Doctor was watching over her by having him show up at the club, so stamping him over prior scenes just doesn't really feel needed. To me, this is a textbook example of poor editing, wherein an editor wants to show something, but they don't really have a clever way to introduce it into the scene, so they just smash cut to it even if it's completely disconnected from what's going on. The all-time most infamous example of this can be found in Ed Wood's magnum opus, Plan 9 from Outer Space. Sometimes in the middle of a scene, the movie will just randomly cut to a shot of Vampira or fake Bela Lugosi, for seemingly no reason other than to remind you that they exist.
Now you stay close to the officer, honey.
I'd feel safer with you.
Now the lieutenant knows best.
And no, in case you're wondering, they're not even in the same location as the other characters. You'll watch through the whole scene waiting for them to become relevant, but they never do. Now, obviously this episode's editing is not nearly as bad as Plan 9 from Outer Spaces, but I really feel as if these unnecessary shots seriously cheapen his actual entrance into the episode. Yes, in the grand scheme of things this may sound fairly minor, but Rose just does so much better of a job introducing a brand new audience to this character.
I'm the Doctor, by the way. What's your name?
Rose.
Nice to meet you, Rose. Run for your life.
On that note, the directing throughout the entire episode is very bizarre in places, and there are way too many uncomfortable close-up shots for my taste.
Hold on. You mean now?
Today, Christmas Eve!
That's amazing! I was foundled.
I love that.
You'd think this was directed by someone who worked on the Chibnall era. Oh. Okay then. Even with all of this being said, there are aspects of this episode that I like. It has a heart, it's fun, we're finally getting a Christmas special for the first time since Chibnall decided he hates Christmas.
There can only be one Chris on Doctor Who. Fuck out of here, Santa.
But like Rose, as an individual episode, I don't think it's really something to write home about, which is a shame because Ncudi's Doctor absolutely is. He is so charismatic and loquacious, holy moly.
Last time I saw Doctor, he tried to murder me, so you stay away.
Oh. Even his laugh, man. That's a Time Lord's laugh right there. So that's it then. All 4 specials. Obviously I had my gripes with them, but who cares what I think? What really matters is what the general public thought. So what did they thought? Well, unfortunately, the answer to this question is very deeply tied to politics. I'm sorry.
I would like to make a hat out of your fucking entrails.
Now, when I say politics, I mean it in 2 senses of the word. One, the obvious way, the cultural impact of these episodes and how people responded to their social messaging. 2, the off-camera politics that go into making a show, aka the social hierarchies and behind-the-scenes drama that led to these episodes being the way they are. It's the same way Christopher Eccleston used the word when criticizing the behind-the-scenes politics of Series 1.
I love being associated with a character, just don't like being associated with those people and the politics that went on in the first series.
And then, of course, a bunch of terrible YouTubers misinterpreted this as Chris complaining about wokeness in Doctor Who and went to town spreading misinformation far and wide. But what Chris is actually saying here should be of great interest to any Doctor Who fan. We'll come back to this in a bit. First, we're going to tackle real politics. We'll get it over with quickly, I promise.
I will tear your fucking skin off. I will wear it to your mother's birthday party, and I will rub your nuts up and down her leg whilst whistling Bohemian fucking Rhapsody.
Doctor Who is no stranger to politics. It has long had political messaging in its episodes, since the very beginning, if we're being honest.
There are always those who resist progress. Progress! Don't listen to him. He means fatter profits for global chemicals.
But it was only around the time Capaldi was leaving and Chibnall was taking over that the backlash from conservatives started to foment. Which is funny because Chibnall's first season is markedly less left-wing than Peter Capaldi's last season is. There's literally an entire episode in Series 10 devoted to critiquing capitalism.
The end point of capitalism, where human life has no value at all. We're fighting an algorithm, like every worker everywhere.
Whereas Series 11 has an episode about how big corporations are actually good and workers' rights are bad.
They want us to be grateful that 10% of people get to work. What about the other 90%? What about our future? We can't let the systems take control!
The systems aren't the problem. How people use and exploit the system, that's the problem.
Kerblam, the company in this episode, is an overt stand-in for Amazon, and it's clearly described throughout the episode that they treat their workers like dirt.
Constant, random monitoring. No such thing as privacy here.
How often do you see your daughter?
Twice a year I splurge on an economy shuttle.
Unnecessary talking can lead to efficiency reductions. Why not pick up the pace a little?
The systems aren't the problem.
How does the Doctor punish this corporation for abusing its workforce? She tells them off a little and then they promise they'll do better and leave.
And I'm going to propose that Kerblam becomes a people-led company in future. Majority organics. People, I mean...
Aw, she called people organics. So wholesome. How does she punish the person fighting for workers' rights? She kills him! I understand that you had to stop his plan, but did you really have to, like, detonate a bunch of bombs on top of him? So as we can see, Series 11 is clearly where things got woke because woman. Either way, things have only snowballed since then. The discourse surrounding these specials has been completely poisoned by the current political landscape, and I do find that annoying, but it's also worth pointing out that there are a lot of issues with how these episodes go about their social messaging, just like in the Chibnall era.
Then let's make it 2023.
I already talked about how I think Russell mishandled the trans representation in the Star Beast, but beyond that, there are more decisions that puzzle me a little. For instance, there was a lot of controversy over Davies' decision to make Davros, a character who's usually depicted in a wheelchair, able to walk in the Children in Need special Destination Skaro. He did this because, in his eyes, Davros represented a negative depiction of wheelchair users.
There's a problem with the Davros of old in that he's a wheelchair user who is evil. I had problems with that, and a lot of us on the production team had the problems with that, of associating disability with evil, and trust me, there's a very long tradition of this. I say this is how we see Davros now. 2023, this is our lens.
And before I go any further, I have to throw out the obvious disclaimer. I'm not disabled. If you watching this video are disabled and you disagree with what I have to say, your thoughts on the matter are more valuable than mine. Don't feel as if I'm trying to invalidate your opinion. This is just how I feel based on everything I can observe. For starters, Russell is 100% correct in identifying that there is a very common trope in fiction of having villains be disabled or disfigured in some way, and I think it's definitely worth talking about that. However, I also don't think it'd be fair to say that there are no circumstances in which a disabled villain would be acceptable. I think it's worth analyzing on a case-by-case basis why the creators chose to make an antagonist disabled, and if these reasons are objectionable or understandable. For example, I doubt many people would complain about a disabled or disfigured antagonist in a story which also features a disabled or disfigured protagonist, or if the story properly empathizes with them in some way and humanizes them. On the flip side, I think the most objectionable disabled antagonists in fiction are the ones that are disabled specifically so that they'll seem different or other to the audience. But most disabled villains don't fall on either side of the spectrum. Most of them are somewhere in the middle, including Davros. Davros wasn't a character who was born disabled, nor did his disability in any way cause him to become evil. He was born onto a war-torn planet and suffered crippling injuries after the building he was in got shelled. He nearly died, but through his own life support systems, he was able to keep himself alive. As time went on, he continued to age, and his life support system kept him artificially alive well beyond the average lifespan of his species. His His body grew increasingly disfigured until he became entirely unrecognizable, and that's the state he's in when we first meet him in Genesis of the Daleks. A man clinging to life at all costs, trying to create something capable of outliving him and carrying his legacy forward come his demise.
Davros is dying.
Davros is ancient. He should have been dust centuries ago.
The Daleks are a manifestation of Davros's will to immortality. They are what he wishes he could be. He looks the way he does because by this point he is effectively half Dalek himself. He's augmented himself to such an extent that there's hardly any of the authentic Davros left. That's why he doesn't sit in a normal wheelchair. I don't even know if you could call it a wheelchair. Doesn't have wheels. He sits in a chair that looks exactly like the bottom half of a Dalek, and in terms of his physical appearance, it's a representation of his transformation into something resembling his own creation. So personally, I think branding him as just another evil wheelchair-using villain is kind of missing the point of his character a little. Can we at least agree that there was no reason to set this short on Skaro? If Russell didn't want to feature a disabled villain in a Children in Need special, which I fully understand and appreciate, that's fine. But why go out of your way to pick a previously disabled character to be the villain of the special just so you can undisable them? Why not just choose a different villain? And why respond to fans on social media who are critical of the change, even ones who are being wholly respectful, with such hostility, some of whom seem to be wheelchair users themselves? It seems, to me at least, like Russell picked Davros to make a statement. Like he knew this would cause controversy and generate a lot of press, and he wanted it to, because he wants it to be known that this era will not be problematic in ways the show may have been in the past. Russell's first era of Doctor Who had not one, not two, but three different wheelchair-bound villains, though you have to extend the definition of the word wheelchair in some cases. Russell doesn't acknowledge this anywhere in any of his statements regarding Davros, but I can't help but suspect that part of the reason why he's making such a show of this is because he wants to apologize for these past decisions of his. Though this is just pure speculation on my part. I feel a similar way about the trans representation in the Star Beast. Believe it or not, Rose is not the first trans character Russell's ever written for the show. That would be Cassandra O'Brien.
That's where I used to live when I was a little boy, down there.
Yes, the human trampoline that was meant to satirize vanity and cosmetic surgery was Doctor Who's first ever trans character.
I've had my chin completely taken away, and look at the difference. Look how thin I am.
How many operations have you had?
708. Next week, it's 709. I'm having my blood bleached.
Was this intentional transphobia on Russell's part? I doubt it. It's just a throwaway line, and considering this episode came out in 2005, before trans issues were really mainstream, he probably just threw the line in there as a joke without thinking twice about it. But even so, I suspect that he probably regrets this one. And like with Davros, I think the Star Beast may have been driven in part by his own guilt.
Honestly, it doesn't hurt.
I would rather die. It's better to die than live like you, a bitchy trampoline.
She didn't even do anything to you yet, Rose. Just let her live her life. Jeez, go back to your uncle. There are a lot of little things like this in Russell's era, to be honest. Like, as far as I know, there's only one homophobic line in all of Doctor Who, and it was written by Russell T Davies.
And I've never been slapped by someone's mother.
Your face.
It hurts.
You're so gay.
And obviously, Russell T Davies is a gay man, so I'm not accusing him of being homophobic. I think he was just playing to the culture of the time, and it resulted in some moments that he probably wishes he'd never written. And thus we get overcompensation. Even something like the 13th Doctor's clothes regenerating with her is an example of Russell writing like he's on very thin ice. Why was this necessary? Russell's explanation is as follows. I was very certain that I didn't want David to appear in Jodie's costume. I think the notion of men dressing in women's clothes, the notion of drag, is very delicate. I'm a huge fan of that culture and the dignity of that. It's truly a valuable thing, but it has to be done with immense thought and respect. With respect to Jodie and her doctor, I think it can look like mockery when a straight man wears her clothes. To put a great big 6-foot Scotsman into them looks like we're taking the mickey. So here, Russell has given a socio-political reason for why the 14th Doctor can't wear Jodie's costume, but he never gave a story reason. As of now, there is still no story reason for why this happened. and I don't think there's gonna be. This again plays into what I was talking about earlier with Dave Filoni's approach to writing Star Wars. Is it okay to write something that doesn't actually make any sense just for the sake of hitting on new ideas or themes? Like I said, as long as you're a creative writer, in my opinion, there's no reason you should have to throw logic out the window just to tackle a certain issue. Genuinely, why not even attempt to write in an explanation? The fact that he didn't, again, makes me think that he left it like this intentionally to make a statement. But why? Why? What is to be achieved by doing that, narratively or politically? In fact, how is this even really progressive in the first place? I understand that his intention is to be respectful to Jodie and potentially avoid giving the anti-woke media an image they can latch onto, but all he's really doing here is censoring a man from appearing in women's clothing on mainstream TV. If that's the definition of progressive, then the 80s was a very progressive time. Freddie Mercury doing drag on TV would have been way too much for the masses to handle. Better ban it and relegate drag to designated quarantine zones where it won't spill out into anything else. Is it not more progressive to cast aside the gendered notions of who can wear what clothing and show David Tennant wearing clothes that would be typically deemed as feminine for millions of viewers to see? Tabloids be damned. Also, damn, David Tennant looks kind of fine in women's clothing. And the real kicker here is that Jodie said herself that she didn't want her outfit to be viewed as feminine. She wanted it to be viewed as gender-neutral clothing.
The main journey of it came from a photograph that I found of a woman in trousers, braces and a t-shirt walking, and it felt timeless, it felt intriguing, and it was neither male or female, which was really important to me.
So ultimately, it isn't really respectful to her wishes to have her clothing change like this, just so that David Tennant won't be seen in women's clothing. This isn't the only time that one of Russell's attempts to be progressive kind of backfired. Let's turn our attention back to the Toymaker, who, as Doctor Who Unleashed points out, was a somewhat racist character in his original depiction.
Why was the original Toymaker, who was a white man, dressed up as a Chinese Mandarin? Why?
This was a different time, when production teams would not have appreciated the impact this form of stereotyping would have on the audience. Today, we live in a diverse society where cultural appropriation is not acceptable.
Russell's so sensitive to this, he doesn't even want to refer to the Toymaker by the name Celestial Toymaker, because apparently
the word Celestial can mean of Chinese origin in a derogatory way. Yeah, it also means from the sky, but it can also mean Chinese.
Going off this, I would have assumed that Russell would have chosen to just make the Toymaker not be racist anymore, but he goes a different route.
And in acknowledgement of his past, Russell's Toymaker still has a clear and deliberate racist aspect.
People will pipe up saying in 1966 this was a racist character. I did not want to whitewash the Toymaker then, so I gave him this side of putting on accents.
So what Russell's saying here is that he thinks it's an important part of the Toymaker's character to be racist, so he's racist against Germans now instead of Chinese people. Problem solved?
Oh, well, that's all right then!
Ironically, by doing this, Russell writes the Toymaker in such a fashion as to play into one of the most common villain stereotypes of all time, to make your villain German. Or in his case, pretending to be German, but it still comes off that way. And people don't choose to be German. They're born that way. Believe it or not. Look, I normally love to see television shows embracing progressive ideas, I really do, but Russell's approach to progressiveness in these specials can feel a little performative? I don't say that in an accusatory way, I'm sure his heart was in the right place, but it all just comes across as a little misguided.
Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
You're assuming he as a pronoun.
My chosen pronoun is the definite article.
It's weird to have that in the episode but still refer to the Meep as a he in the script. This extends even to some of the smaller decisions made by Russell in these specials, like casting a brown actor to play Sir Isaac Newton, which you may have noticed I didn't bring up before now because it's such a small part of the episode that I really don't think it's worth getting hung up on. A lot of people felt personally attacked by this casting decision. Do I care about it that much? No, but I wouldn't really call this casting decision progressive either, as many have in its defense. Why do I say that? Well, Doctor Who has kind of developed a habit of presenting British history with rose-tinted goggles. Now, that's not to be confused with me condemning patriotism in Doctor Who. I think that's a-okay. I mean, American media is full of patriotism, so why can't Doctor Who be?
Only an idiot hangs the Union flag upside down. Shame on you.
I'm more talking to the moments when Doctor Who intentionally whitewashes Britain's past. Well, whitewashing might not be the best term here, but you know what I mean. Now, this isn't the first time that Doctor Who has implied that British history is very diverse.
You'd be surprised. Elizabethan England, not so different from your time.
Regency England. A bit more black than they show in the movies.
History's a whitewash.
The thing is, it is actually 100% true that there were people of color living in London around this time. However, most estimates place them around 10,000 in a city of 1 million, which would have made up 1% of the population. So when Thin Ice portrays 1800s London as a diverse ethnic melting pot, it is a bit of an exaggeration. Stephen Moffat has spoken on this directly, saying, "We've kind of got to tell a lie. We'll go back into history and there will be black people where historically there wouldn't have been, and we won't dwell on that. We'll say to hell with it, this is the imaginary, better version of the world. By believing in it, we'll summon it forth." And that's completely fair. That's a reasonable stance to take on the matter. Even if it's not 100% historically accurate, this show also features Shakespeare fighting witches and the Doctor destroying Satan by pushing him into a black hole, so is this really pushing it too far? No. Though I do find it a little bizarre how the episode frames this information as if it's empirically true.
A bit more black than they show in the movies.
The only point I'm trying to make here is that this fits into a larger trend of Doctor Who kind of cleansing British history. Speaking as a foreigner, this is one of the main things that jumps out at me in the show when watching historical episodes. I think we all remember how the show portrayed Winston Churchill as a nice, jovial, fun-loving guy.
A record? Good Lord, man, have you never heard of downloads?
So wholesome. No skeletons in that closet whatsoever. This may just be my opinion, but I wouldn't call it progressive to just kind of pretend that Britain never had issues with deep-rooted racism, and on the occasion that they do show a racist, it's implied that they're just kind of an exception. Is that not kind of erasure of everything minority groups had to struggle through? Is it not more progressive to portray historical racism as it was so that an audience can be educated on it? Especially if we're talking about an audience of children. And the show has done this, like in the episode Rosa from Series 11, which received a lot of praise for tackling racism head-on, except that this episode is set in Alabama. In fact, when you start looking, you notice a clear difference between how the US and UK are portrayed throughout the show.
You think you can just shoot me?
They're Americans!
The first ever Doctor Who story set in the US is about gun violence.
People keep giving me guns, and I do wish they wouldn't. I wonder, would you mind looking after it for me?
My pleasure.
The next story set in the US... Okay, I guess we're doing this again. To be fair, what actually ends up killing the 7th Doctor in the end is the US healthcare system. So that's a whole other can of worms. There is a clear pattern that episodes set in the United States tackle issues with the United States head-on.
Your boy, he'll be swinging from a tree with the noose for a neckerchief. If he touches a white woman in Montgomery.
Whereas episodes set in Britain, more often than not, pretend that those issues never happened. Even episodes that are technically set in the UK but feature an American antagonist still play into this trend.
What's wrong with you people? What is wrong with this country? Why don't you do what normal people do? Get a gun, shoot things like a civilized person.
Now, there are exceptions to this rule, like Demons of the Punjab, which, unless I'm missing something, is the only time Doctor Who has ever aired an episode that was even slightly critical of the British Empire. But I digress, this rule holds pretty true throughout the show's entire run. Man, America seems like such an awful place where everyone's Donald Trump.
The future president of the United States.
How's this for fire and fury?
Real subtle there. But Britain? We've never done anything objectionable. Britain was always a super diverse and accepting place, and Winston Churchill was a great guy who the Doctor would definitely not abhor. I agree that Doctor Who needs more people of color in its cast, but I think the way to go about that, if we're talking about historical episodes, is to shine more of a light onto non-white historical figures that commonly get overlooked, instead of just putting even more attention onto Sir Isaac Newton, a white historical figure that everyone's already familiar with. Now, all of this being said, even though I think Russell's approach to politics in Doctor Who has been far from perfect as of late, there's a far more destructive force currently targeting the show. It's not Russell, it's the Backlash.
David Tennant once again takes the role of the Time Lord, the Doctor, and nobody cared.
As you can imagine, being that we live in a time of culture war, Doctor Who has become one of the hottest new fronts, and the majority of discourse about these specials has nothing to do with the plots, but rather a few specific moments that people talk about over and over and over again. Asking the Meep for its pronouns, a male presenting Time Lord, a brown actor playing Isaac Newton, the Doctor saying Isaac Newton looked hot.
Was Isaac Newton hot?
He was, wasn't he? He was so hot.
This is all these people care to talk about because their brains have been ruined by an endless stream of culture war bullshit on their feeds.
Shame you're not a woman anymore, because you'd understand. But you're male presenting, aren't you, Doctor Who? I know how we'll sign up the population. I know what we can do, because we're trying to destroy gender roles and we're trying to destroy everything else, so that all the kids grow up and wear wigs and castrate themselves medically, and then we'll have everybody controlled as eunuchs.
Yes, that is Andrew Tate complaining about Doctor Who. I don't know what timeline we're in. The fact of the matter is that this is not actual nuanced discussion of the specials. It's nothing more than political rhetoric.
He inserted so much deviant messaging and woke BS. Donna's son-daughter and Tennant suddenly being gay, and it was awful. But this is supposed to be a pseudo-intellectual show, right? And thus, we should be as factually accurate as we can be.
Oh, just shut the hell up. Reality check time for the canceling salivating mob coming into my comment section, and it's sad that I have to make disclaimers in every video on this subject.
The length some of these videos go to defame not only Russell, but anyone even remotely associated with the show can be a little off-putting. I've seen videos that accuse Russell of being a pathological liar because he remembered a fact wrong on a podcast.
No one's done this since Rose Tyler many years ago. Good old Billy.
Really?
Did a circuit of the TARDIS, and wouldn't you?
Victorian Clara in The Snowman, she does a complete circuit around the TARDIS, checking for tricks and traps along the way. So we have established that RTD is not telling the truth here. Now, why is he lying?
I mean, there's always the chance that he made a mistake, as human beings are known to do. There's also the issue of narratives flip-flopping whenever it's convenient. 6 years ago, Stephen Moffat was the woke writer who ruined Doctor Who, and Russell T Davies was the GOAT.
The angry, man-hating feminist bile that spews out of some of the characters' mouths goes unchallenged.
Now the narrative has completely switched.
Honestly, I don't know why people complained so much about Stephen Moffat when he was in charge. Remember, of course, when you are the showrunner of a BBC show, you pretty much have no choice but to say all that crap, like we need to represent more different colours and women, and so I never bought that Moffat actually really believed in this stuff. Of course, you're gonna have to say that. You work for the fucking BBC. They're communists.
Funny enough, Stephen Moffat actually came across one of these videos and got so annoyed by it that he directly tweeted about it, debunking it.
Stephen Moffat, the former Doctor Who showrunner, personal hero of mine, and to my knowledge the least sullied of all the modern Who showrunners, had replied and apparently debunked my video. I mean, I'm quite happy to have received this response, and you know, if that is really you, Stephen Moffat, then thank you very much for trying to clarify. However, I kind of have to take issue with the response.
Now, in all fairness, I'm not calling out every commentary channel that's ever made a critical video of Doctor Who. Some of them are perfectly fine. I'm specifically talking about the ones that are clearly made in bad faith. And over the past few months, YouTube has presented me with more bad faith videos than I can count. These thumbnails are genuinely nightmare fuel. Like, what is this? Who makes this? Who is this fetish shit? And honestly, I could probably spend hours going over all of them, but I've decided to hone in on just one that I think perfectly encapsulates what most of these videos are like. Say hello to Reaper, an up-and-coming YouTube reviewer, who has many more subscribers than me, so I don't have to feel guilty about punching down. He's made a series of decently successful videos tearing into the 60th anniversary specials, mostly because of them being woke. And here's a snippet from one of them.
David Tennant is all sad and actually starts to cry on his black counterpart's shoulder, probably because he considers winning too masculine.
How dare they make the Doctor cry? The Doctor never would have cried back in the good old days when the show was good.
So he must have a big long cry in order to balance it out.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're crying like a woman.
I love all the Futurama and Family Guy cutaways throughout these videos, by the way. They're gold.
He keeps asking the fat black woman if they remember Ruby. The Doctor is a Time Lord who deals with situations like this every day, yet he is so shocked by this, so upset, that he actually begins to cry.
Is it really that out of character for the Doctor to cry after someone he formed an emotional connection with doesn't only die, but gets wiped from existence along with dozens of other foster children because of his own actions?
There is no excuse for him to be crying over this, other than the writers wanted him to be a weak, pathetic character that shows zero masculinity.
You're crying like a woman.
Hey, there it is again.
There is no excuse for him to be crying over this, other than the writers wanted him to be a weak, pathetic character.
These videos are the poster child for bad faith analysis that's clearly meant to push a political agenda.
Speaking of which, her son is now a chick with a dick who goes by the name of Rose. As his original name was Jason, she ends up getting saved by her daughter, who just so happens to have a penis. But of course, Donna and her daughter, who just so happens to have a penis.
I mean, he does try to criticize the actual plots of these episodes, but it quickly becomes evident that he doesn't really know what he's talking about.
Intercept teleport!
He then teleports the Ant people to him, because that too is yet another ability that he has now.
An ability that he has now? What are you talking about? Have you watched the show?
Now we're never gonna get her!
Oh, the Doctor's very good at teleports.
Many of his criticisms display either that he wasn't paying attention or did no research before making these videos. At one point he criticizes Russell T Davies for not featuring Wilfred more in the Giggle.
Oh yeah, Wilfred is not even in this episode. He's only a man who the Doctor sacrifices life to save. Ah, fuck him. Why would they give us a character we would actually like to see, when instead we can just have wheels and her go-go gadget wheelchair?
It would have taken him approximately one Google search to find out that Wilfred was originally supposed to be in the Giggle, but the actor died before they could film it.
He came back to us to shoot what actually turned out to be his final scene. We didn't know that at the time. If we wanted to do more, because we love him, he wasn't well enough to do more.
But fuck it, who does research before posting videos, right? And some of his other criticisms just seem to display a lack of knowledge about culture.
He's wearing a vest and a skirt, probably so that Russell T Davies can get more upskirt shots.
Is that a fucking dress?
No, it's a kilt, because he's Scottish. But okay, it's a dress. Whatever makes it easier for you to claim that these episodes are destroying masculinity.
The Doctor has decided to love dick now.
But I think my favorite moment out of any of his videos has to be this. So at the end of Church on Ruby Road, this woman reveals that she knows what the TARDIS is by straight up breaking the fourth wall.
It just disappeared.
Never seen a TARDIS before.
We don't yet know who she is, but she'll likely be significant to the upcoming season. Before this point in the episode, she pretends not to know what it is when other people are around because obviously she wants this to be secret. Either that or she didn't realize what it was until she saw it disappear. A very easy to understand plot point, right?
The final shot is of some random woman saying this.
Never seen a TARDIS before.
Let's go back to the beginning of the episode.
Have you seen what he's done? Putting that there?
Well, what makes you think it was me?
Because you've never liked me.
What the fuck are you talking about?
She had no idea what a TARDIS was, but now she does. Does nobody at the BBC double check their scripts anymore?
Come on, man. In this scene, he says that he's Superman, and yet in the next scene, he says he's Clark Kent and doesn't have superpowers anymore. I don't get it. Where did his superpowers go?
That doesn't even make any sense!
My god, do they even double check these scripts? Despite how obviously bad faith these videos are, people take them seriously and it informs how they view these specials. And obviously I didn't even like these specials that much, but it does bother me how dishonest and politically slanted discourse surrounding them has been. I'll be the first to admit that not every video I've ever made about Doctor Who is perfect, but at least I wasn't talking complete nonsense.
Get this bullshit splitting up of the Doctors is called by generation because even the act of regenerating is gay now.
Actually, you know what? Take everything I said back. This guy's amazing and we all need to make content more like his.
Gay generation.
Let's try to look at the other side of the equation for a minute here. Despite the massive backlash, and perhaps a larger than average amount of detractors, these episodes did quite well in a number of other areas. Most Doctor Who fans who'd been actively keeping up with the show seem to be satisfied with them, which makes sense because they are an improvement on what came prior.
Chocolate.
And they received fairly high ratings despite what the anti-woke channels may tell you. So, with the jury having deliberated, putting all this evidence together, are these episodes capable of reinventing Doctor Who the same way Russell did back in 2005? And for that matter, can the show recoup the popularity it had 15 years ago?
Yeah. No.
I can't say in good confidence that these episodes are the show's salvation. But not because the episodes themselves aren't good enough. If you recall, the first few episodes of Series 1 aren't that great when push comes to shove either. The reason that I don't think these specials cut it as launching pads for a whole new series is because the problems plaguing these episodes aren't new. In fact, they're old. 19 years old to be exact. The same age as the episode Rose, which is also the same age that Rose is in that episode. I like funny coincidences. I mean, think about it. The Deus Ex Machinas, the needless overcomplicating the lore, bad editing, the reliance on series-long mystery boxes, the mishandling of politics, and the show seemingly being pivoted towards a younger audience than that which is actually watching it. These are all problems I've been criticizing in the show for years, and they crop up across every era of modern Who. Funny enough, I think the show's opening titles have become a perfect metaphor for this stagnation. What do I mean by this? Every single iteration of the show's opening since 2005 has had some kind of little mistake in it that was never corrected. The 2005 titles were out of sync with the music in almost every episode they appeared in. You can tell because the sound effects aren't aligned properly. The Series 7 version of the 2010 titles has such ludicrously strong color filters put over everything it actively hurts to look at, and the contrast is dialed so high that the white-black balance of the vortex starts clipping. Oh god, it looks awful. The 2013 titles showcased a TARDIS that the VFX artists forgot to add lighting effects to, and as a cherry on top, the TARDIS doors open the wrong way. The 2014 titles were also out of sync with the music half the time. And has VFX that abruptly vanish before making it off screen. And the 2018 titles have text that is very visibly off-center. So this of course begs the question, is there a mistake in the newest version of the titles? Actually, there are two. The theremin in the opening music is slightly out of sync with the bass line, and when the text displaying the names of the lead actors was swapped out from David Tennant and Catherine Tate to Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson respectively, They somehow re-rendered everything a couple of frames off the mark, leaving a noticeable gap between the text itself and the TARDIS that's supposed to reveal it. On their own, none of these mistakes really matter, but when you pile them all on top of each other, you have to ask how this keeps happening over and over and over again. It is an actual curse. And even though little mistakes in the opening sequence don't really have any bearing on the actual quality of the show, I can't think of any other shows that have so regularly had this problem. It's like Doctor Who can make the same mistakes over and over and over and over again and never learn from them. A good example of this is how the show's audio is mixed. Music is frequently so loud that it's hard to hear what characters are even saying.
Your arms are too long.
And this has been a recurring problem since Series 1. Across almost 20 years of different writers, directors, showrunners, this problem will not go away.
Open the gate! Use that cube thing, come on!
Sonic screwdriver.
Use it! Nah. I can't leave you, what will you do?
I must defend Her Majesty now. Don't think of me, just go.
Stop. You could very well be standing right outside a trap street.
This is devastating as you're imagining. Grateful you weren't there.
This is Commander Rinsmore. The fleet is under attack from insurgents.
Let me see.
Look at the baby.
I'm getting flashbacks to Sonic Adventure 2.
What you see is what you get. Just a guy that loves adventure. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog.
And it's not just the volume of the music that I take issue with, but the quantity of music. Feel free to send your hate mail to me at the above email. I know that I've praised Murray religiously in the past, and it's true that he is a genius musician capable of writing music that can evoke emotion stronger than almost any dialogue ever could, but I don't see why virtually every second of every episode should be filled with his music, even scenes that really don't need it.
I don't think I ever knew it was going to be so much music. Just got the first episode and did that, and then did the second episode, and it slowly dawned on me that they were going to want music all the way through.
There's a scene from The Giggle where the Doctor and Mel are catching up, and it's a very sweet, sentimental scene between two old friends. Yet, for some reason, there's this epic music blaring in the background that doesn't match with the scene's tone at all.
I travelled the stars. Good old Sablon Blitz. He lived till he was 101.
What?
Died falling over a whiskey bottle. It's a perfect way to go.
Couldn't this scene have just been silent? Or if there had to be music, why not something a little more sentimental or emotional?
But then I had to face up to the one thing I'd been running away from. I've got nothing.
I think the overabundance of music can actually take away from emotions that certain scenes are trying to convey. And once again, fitting my thesis here, this has been a problem for a long time. Take, for instance, this scene from 2015's Christmas special, The Husbands of River Song. It's a comedic scene in which the Doctor enters the TARDIS and, since he's undercover, has to pretend that he doesn't know it's bigger on the inside.
Before you come in, you better prepare yourself for a shock. It's not as snug as it looks.
Finally, it's my go.
Chicanery ensues.
Is it bigger?
Yes.
On the inside.
Oh, you certainly grasped the essentials.
My entire understanding of physical space has been transformed!
When I first watched this scene, I didn't find it funny, but I couldn't put my finger on why. The premise of the scene and the lines themselves are actually pretty good, and yet it just doesn't make me laugh.
Three-dimensional Euclidean geometry has been torn up, thrown in the air, and slogged to death!
Why? Well, at some point I suddenly realized that the reason I don't find this scene funny is because of the music. You see, over the seasons, Murray developed a habit of adding funny clown music to comedic scenes.
What are you like?
I don't know. Gandalf. Bit of space Gandalf. Or the little green one in Star Wars. Personally, he prefers to be called Stormageddon, Dark Lord of all.
Sorry, what?
That's what he calls himself.
Look at me.
Yep, looking.
Seriously?
To me, at least, there is no better way to make something not funny than by adding funny music to it. Seriously, let's try watching this scene without music.
God! Is it bigger?
Oh, yes.
On the inside.
Look, we need to concentrate.
There it is.
Yep, I know where you're going with this, but I need you to calm down.
On the outside?
Am I crazy, or is this so much better?
Sorry. I've always wanted to see that done properly.
Would you like a drink? Help yourself.
I won't say that comedic music never works, especially during montages, but as a rule of thumb, I think it should be used sparingly, and this show does not use it sparingly. At the end of the day, I suppose this is subjective, but I think there's a reason that awkward humor is usually conveyed without music in most pieces of media, because without music, the joke just speaks for itself.
What a brilliant joke!
Whereas when funny music is blaring in the background, it almost feels as if the scene is trying to be funny. And I personally think that directors should take the same approach to humor in films and TV as stand-up comedians do to a live set. You never want the audience to think you're desperately trying to be funny. You just want to be funny, if you get me. Just my take on it, though. And now that Murray Gold's back, so's the funny music.
I think I broke this multi-claw adaptable. What is it? Oh.
And I can already hear the counter-arguments. This is a kid's show, so why would comedic scenes be directed the same as they are in adult comedies? To which I would respond, 1, a lot of Doctor Who humor is clearly meant to appeal to adults. See all the sex jokes as reference.
I've come from the Doctor too.
Yes, but at a different point in time.
Unless there's 2 of them.
No. That's a whole different birthday.
Get a girlfriend, Jeff.
And 2, just because something is for kids, that doesn't mean it's automatically exonerated from any potential poor creative decisions. I would argue Marvel movies are for kids too, and even though they're far from perfect, even they don't employ funny music in the same way that Doctor Who does.
You know, you should come by Stark Tower sometime.
Thanks, but the last time I was in New York, I kind of broke Harlem.
I didn't like this music even when I was a kid. And I'm sorry, but to me it just sucks the humor out of any scene it's inserted into like a vacuum. Murray Gold is a great composer, but I really don't understand why the show just can't move past him after all this time. And it's not just Murray Gold, it's, well, everything. Why does it feel like this show can't creatively move forwards? The classic series may have had its issues, but at least it was always evolving creatively. Every Doctor had a tonally distinct era. Hell, even within the scope of certain Doctor's eras, there are pronounced movements that totally reinvent the show's style. The first Doctor's early episodes feel nothing like his later ones. Same goes for the 4th Doctor and the 7th Doctor. To put things into perspective, New Who has been on the air for 19 years now. Think about how much classic Who changed in that same time frame. 1963 Doctor Who is not the same show as 1982 Doctor Who at all. And whilst it's true that television as a whole changed a lot across that period, I think it's bizarre that New Who has barely shifted stylistically across its entire run. Though I do have a theory for why this is the case. Here's where the second meaning of the word politics comes into play. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the Fitzroy Club. Let me take you back to the 1990s. Doctor Who is off the air, and control over the franchise essentially passes into the hands of the fans. The Fitzroy Club, also known as the Fitzroy Crowd, refers to an assortment of writers who essentially became the de facto faces of the fandom during this time, known for their Doctor Who novels, audio dramas, and even parodies. The Fitzroy Club got their name from the Fitzroy Tavern, a pub many of them frequented while brainstorming ideas for potential Doctor Who stories they may one day pursue. When the show was off the air, they were the keepers of the flame. Or in simpler terms, they were basically nerdy fanfiction writers who couldn't let Doctor Who die. But dedication is dedication. Not everyone who's considered part of the Fitzroy Club is actually confirmed to have been a regular at the bar. But there aren't many other names that tie them all together. A lot of them did contribute to the Virgin book series, but the Virgin Club might not necessarily have the best ring to it. Might be more accurate though. Zing! Who were they? I hear you asking? Well, if you happen to be a Doctor Who fan, you already know their names. Stephen Moffat, Chris Chibnall, Paul Cornell, Mark Gatiss, Nicholas Briggs, and of course, Russell T Davies, along with various other names you may also know. The point is, virtually everyone responsible for shaping the 2005 reboot into what it became was part of this clique. In all this time, control of Doctor Who has passed from Russell T Davies to Stephen Moffat to Chris Chibnall, and then back to Russell, with no outsiders being allowed in. Even people who weren't members of the original Fitzroy Club, like Murray Gold, have basically gained an honorable membership in just how much the show has become reliant on them. I think the cliquey nature of Doctor Who's upper management has led to some seriously toxic behind-the-scenes politics. It's been well documented that there have been many issues with Doctor Who's production over the years, perhaps most infamously is what happened with Series 1. Now, what actually went down when the season was being filmed is still somewhat unknown, but it has been confirmed by Russell himself that the first production block of the season was a nightmare. It's alleged that at one point extras were put in danger's way when the director wanted to get a shot of a flaming sofa flying at people, and after someone almost got killed, the shot wasn't even usable anyways. And if this is true, safety regulations being violated is only the tip of the iceberg. By all means, it seems like the second production block smoothed things over a little bit. However, according to one source I found, it was during this production block that Russell's inexperience with handling a sci-fi budget came to fruition, because he burned basically the entire season's budget on just the second episode, making the production of the rest of Series 1 not a blast. According to Christopher Eccleston, low-paid workers were constantly being mistreated by those running the show, and when he tried to report this to Doctor Who's extremely closed-off upper management, in his own words,
"I could see what was going on and reported it back, and I just got silenced."
These aren't the only problems that plagued the production of this season. Of the 4 companions featured throughout the season, 3 of them are played by actors who were later accused of sexual misconduct. What a work environment. Now, for the sake of full transparency and not spreading slander, the accusations against John Barrowman are not to the same severity as those against Clark or Langley. Where their accusations are of the criminal variety, John Barrowman just seems to have no conception of boundaries.
So we get into Katie's trailer, and it's lit beautifully, so I took off all my clothes and I posed on every surface. Every time I would do a close-up, or it was her close-up, I would get the kids out and try to throw her off.
And I got in the front with the driver like this, and you know your windscreen wipers? Yeah. John used his body, or his part of his body, as the windscreen wiper, jumped on the bonnet of this car, pulled his trousers down and his pants, and did this. And you know what? I just went, I was kind of apologetic to the driver, and I kind of turned to the driver and I went, "Oh, he's so silly."
It seems like he thought being naked was the pinnacle of humor, and so he would take any excuse he could to take his dick out on set.
Hi, this is John Barrowman, and you're following me. You get to see what it takes to be Jack in Doctor Who. Am I naked in front of millions of viewers?
Still not great, but in the case of Noel Clarke, he's been accused of groping women and abusing his position of power to elicit sexual favors by at least 20 different individuals. There is no way to read this as just an innocent prank gone wrong. It seems like his behavior was not only predatory, but a pattern, and for a long time, he continued to get away with it. I'm not blaming Russell directly for this. I have no way of knowing how much he was aware of as showrunner, and I'll offer him the benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, he has to have been aware of what was going on with John. You can't be in charge of a television show and not know that one of your main cast members keeps showing other people their penis on set. I won't dwell on speculation, but I feel like there is a decent chance that one of the many things Christopher Eccleston complained to Russell about was Barrowman's behavior, which ultimately nothing was done about. Regardless of what the exact reason for his departure was, he did leave after only 1 season. And what did the BBC do in response to this? They blacklisted him, ruining his career in the UK for a time. They also went behind his back and publicly announced his exit, explaining that the reason he was leaving was because he didn't want to be typecast and because he didn't have the energy to play the part.
I agreed with Russell that I would go quietly and respectfully, and I would look after the show. And then, without saying anything to me, they announced that I was leaving. I was walking down the street and suddenly I got quite a lot of aggression. They created a quote and they attributed it to me, which said I was tired. And I didn't find it too tiring. I found it too tiring working with Russell and Phil and Julia. I didn't find it physically too tiring. When they said that, any other producer reading that would go, "Oh, we're not going to employ Chris Eccleston because he gets tired." So it was a lie.
Now this whole too tired thing was a huge controversy. Eccleston called them out for making up a quote and then they printed a retraction, but the damage was done. His acting career had been badly damaged. And I believe the fallout from this drama manifested itself in one of Russell's scripts. There's a line from the 2005 Christmas special, the first episode after Chris's exit, that I am almost positive was a direct shot at him. In that episode, the Prime Minister of Britain destroys an alien spaceship that was trying to flee, which infuriates the Doctor. He confronts her, telling her that what she just did was murder, but she's having none of it.
That was murder.
That was defense.
So he goes on the offensive and tells her that he could end her career in just 6 words.
Don't challenge me, Harriet Jones.
I could bring down your government with a single word.
I don't think you're quite capable of that.
No, you're right. Not a single word. Just 6.
And what are those 6 words?
Don't you think she looks tired?
Now that reminds me of something. What could it be?
Doctor, what was that? What did he say? What did you say, Doctor? Doctor!
I've heard numerous times that this was a reference to Margaret Thatcher, and that may well be true.
Unemployment and depression. Thank you, Margaret Thatcher.
However, the drama of Christopher's exit would have been looming over Russell just as he was writing this episode, and whether it was conscious or not, I think it may have influenced what he wrote.
You'd all love to see Christopher come back as the Doctor, right? See? Now, what would have to happen for that to become a reality?
Sack Russell T Davies, sack Jane Tranter, sack Phil Collinson, sack Julie Gardner, and I'll come back. So can you arrange that?
With Christopher gone, the Fitzroy Club could go back to having uncontested control over Doctor Who, with absolutely no one objecting to it. And the controversies continued. During Stephen Moffat's stint as showrunner, Doctor Who managed to land acclaimed author Neil Gaiman as a guest writer, and he wrote 2 episodes, the first of which is commonly regarded as one of the season's best, but the second of which kind of sucks, much to everyone's surprise. Neil Gaiman himself doesn't seem too happy with how the episode turned out, stating in a chat with The Telegraph that somebody who was running the show at the time heavily modified his script against his will and effectively ruined it. And the only person that it really would make sense for him to be talking about here is Stephen Moffat. Apparently, many of the episode's important character beats ended up being cut, like the Doctor's reluctance to allow children on board the TARDIS, which the episode barely addresses. I mean, if you watch Nightmare in Silver, it kind of seems like there were some genuinely good ideas here, but they are buried under layers and layers of bad pacing and cringe, which of course begs the question, why would you take creative control away from Neil Gaiman after managing to land him? And how many other guest writers has this happened to? If it wasn't already clear, a lot of the problems I've talked about were a direct result of placing so much power into just one individual. I don't want to make the argument that the studio should interfere more with Doctor Who, but the way that, since New Who's inception, every single creative decision has always fallen on one man's shoulders has been very problematic. When Stephen Moffat was showrunner, he was stretched so thin between this, Sherlock, and at one point The Adventures of Tintin, that he started having to hand in first drafts of his scripts to be shot. Have you ever wondered why Let's Kill Hitler is so fucking bad? That's why. The production on that episode was so scuffed that parts of it were filmed a month before transmission. It should never get to the point where objectively unfinished scripts are put into production just because everything fell onto one person. And it's not just Let's Kill Hitler, it's alleged that the series finale was also a first draft script, which, if you've seen it, adds up. And I'm about to go on a bit of a tangent here, but the entire arc of Series 6 ends up being ruined because of this. For reference, Series 6 kicks off with a mystery. A future version of the Doctor is killed, and over the course of the entire series, the Doctor tries and fails to think of a way to avoid this fate. Because of how important of a person he is, his death becomes a fixed point in time, and should he try to avoid it, time itself will disintegrate. At one point he comes across something called a tesselecta, which is basically a robot version of someone with many people inside controlling it. And so naturally a lot of people on the internet theorized that the Doctor we saw on the beach was a tesselecta, but not only did this seem too obvious, but the show went out of its way to tell us this was not a duplicate of the Doctor.
Maybe he's a clone or a duplicate or something.
That most certainly is the Doctor. And he is most certainly dead.
Plus, the solution couldn't possibly be this easy. I mean, if it was, then how come the Doctor hadn't thought of it by now?
One last trip, eh?
It seemed like Moffat had kind of written himself into a corner. Come the finale, and the Doctor finally gives in, accepting that he'll have to die to restore balance to the universe. Until, crammed into the last 2 minutes of the episode, it's revealed that he actually did survive after all. How?
Look into my eye. The Tesselector. A doctor in a doctor's suit.
This is such a nonsensical cop-out that I genuinely think Stephen Moffat came up with it at the last minute. Not only does it contradict information we'd already been given, but the whole reason that the Doctor had to die supposedly was because his death was a fixed point in time. We were told directly that if he doesn't die, all of reality will break, and we actually see that come to pass at the beginning of the episode.
Fixed points can be rewritten.
No, they can't. Of course they can't. Who told you that?
The clock's never tick. What happened to time?
A woman.
Thank you, Stephen. So, how is he able to get out of this by just being in a robot suit of himself? How does that solve the issue? He still doesn't die. It's almost like the episode moves the goalpost to try to make this make sense.
Time said I had to be on that beach, so I dressed for the occasion. Barely got singed in that boat.
No, Time didn't say you had to be on the beach. Time said you had to die. That was like the whole thing. If all you had to do was be on the beach, then why was this ever a problem? The only way you can make this make sense is to argue that it was always supposed to be the Tesselecta Doctor on the beach, and it was never supposed to be where he actually died. But hold on, if that's the case, then why was this a fixed point in time in the first place? I thought fixed points in time are only supposed to be like super important events. It doesn't make sense. There's no way to make it make sense. I'm not alone in suspecting that Stephen Moffat came up with this mystery before he actually figured out the solution to it, ran out of time, and had to quickly pen a super half-assed conclusion that doesn't actually make any sense, and no one stopped him. Why did no one stop him? But if you're not convinced that this is actually true, I'd say look no further than the beach scene from the finale, which was clearly shot on green screen. Now, if this season had actually been written out ahead of time, why wouldn't they have just shot this 30-second scene when they were actually on the beach during the season's second production block? Likely answer: this scene had not been written yet, which pretty much confirms he was coming up with this as he went. The reason I'm harping on this so much is because I think it's a perfect example of what happens when you give one man way too much to do and not enough time to do it. And also that man happens to be Stephen Moffat. Then we come to showrunner number 3, Chris Chibnall, and it's more of the same again. By his own admission, the Series 11 finale was a first draft script because he felt too overworked to put any more time into it. He's also retroactively admitted that he thinks this episode is bad. Yes, we're getting to a point where the production of Doctor Who is so scuffed that showrunners are admitting that their own finales suck. But forget about the scripts, what about the visuals? This same rushed production that's affected the show from the beginning remains on display throughout Chibnall's entire era. You can't be serious. I commonly hear people say that Chibnall's era is the best looking of the revival, and this is due in large part to the fact that the filming equipment got an upgrade. Seasons 11 through 13 are shot with anamorphic lenses, which squeezes the light as it enters the camera in such a way as to produce all kinds of lens flares and other distorted lighting effects. On top of that, these episodes are shot with a much more tight depth of field, which makes the images look more dynamic and three-dimensional. So yeah, in terms of the raw footage they captured for these seasons, it's definitely the best they ever got. Or at least it was when the equipment was being used properly, because it seems like the crew struggled to keep up. I don't know if they didn't have enough time to train with the new lenses or what, but there are a lot of scenes that just look poorly executed, namely interior scenes which frequently look distorted and fish-eyed, and a lot of shots in this era are noticeably out of focus. But where the Chibnall era really drops the ball is in its post-production. Firstly, I don't like how these seasons are color corrected. I noticed while editing that Series 11 tends to suck the saturation out of everything and make it all look grayish, whereas Series 12 and 13 typically add very intense tints over everything, whether it be bluish, greenish, yellowish, or whatever. And in my opinion, neither looks that visually appealing. This era also really struggles in the editing department.
What happened?
Through me.
Are you okay?
They've got them.
Get me back up there.
Legend of the Sea Devils has fight scenes that are so laughably bad that I genuinely think that they're unfinished.
How would you prefer to be addressed?
Where is it?
Mr. Where is it? Lord, where is it? Why are you trashing this place?
This shit doesn't even look professional, man. And this is Doctor Who we're talking about. I expect it to look bad.
No! And I just caught a whopper.
Here's a shot from Legend of the Sea Devils of the Doctor skimming stones. Okay, genuinely, why couldn't they just take a shot of someone actually skimming stones? Like you like a PNG of a stone, just what kind of production hell leads to this being necessary? Then there's episodes like Orphan 55. This entire episode looks like they ran out of time on their production block and tried to do the whole thing as fast as they possibly could. But this is nothing new. Remember that moment from Series 2 I played at the beginning of the video? That was also the result of this episode being stuck in production hell and running out of time. The only difference with Chibnall's era is that these problems have only gotten worse. And then there's the commonly complained about issue of too many extreme close-ups. I have seen some people try to defend Chibnall's era by arguing that this is all stylistic. Like, the over-reliance on close-ups is actually just an intelligent directorial decision to make audiences uncomfortable. Except that most of the time when close-ups are used, they're in scenes where you're clearly not supposed to feel uncomfortable.
I left my family to try and save my family. You're making me miss my family. Don't ever take them for granted.
Like, were we supposed to feel uncomfortable during Jodie's final monologue? Are we supposed to feel uncomfortable, like, half the time? There are many episodes of the show that came out on a lower budget with better shot composition. It can be done. The Girl in the Fireplace is a great example. It makes great use of intense lighting and dynamic framing. This came out in 2006. I'm sorry, but Chibnall's era just doesn't have an excuse to look this bad. I can't tell if the reason the show looks like this is because Chibnall wanted it to, or there simply wasn't enough time to properly storyboard these episodes. But either way, if there were enough checks and balances in place, this would never have happened. This is all my way of saying that way too much of a workload is dumped onto every showrunner, and it seems like production on Doctor Who seasons has consistently been nightmarish since day one, and something needs to change. We were told after Moffat left, and again after Chibnall left, that it was very difficult for the BBC to find a replacement because apparently no one wanted the job. That's how stressful of a position it is. The workload is so high that no one wants to run one of the most popular shows on British TV. At least assuming that this is actually true, as opposed to the alternative being that there were many talented writers who would have loved the job, but the BBC never asked anyone outside of the very small clique of writers that they consider eligible. And I'm kind of inclined to believe that this might be the case because I don't know if I actually believe that there was no qualified writer on the entire planet that wanted this job. There has always been a certain degree of elitism on display in terms of how writers are selected for Doctor Who. If you're American, for instance, don't even bother sending in a script.
We have never let an American write Doctor Who, and if we were going to, we wouldn't start with you.
Simple no thank you would have been sufficient.
In the past few years, guest writers have consistently outshone those who are actually running the show. For example, Maxine Alderton is responsible for penning both The Haunting of Villa Diodati and The Village of Angels, two episodes that most people can agree are the two single best episodes of the 13th Doctor's entire run. And both of them run circles around any of Chibnall's solo material. Personally, I'm kind of partial to Eve of the Daleks, but I know that's an unpopular opinion, so. And yet, come the next series, there's only going to be one episode written by a guest writer. Every other episode is written by either Russell T Davies or Stephen Moffat. And yes, it's entirely possible that they could pen great scripts and it could be a great series, but in my personal opinion, digging up its past is not what this show needs right now. And believe me, this show has become very reliant on digging up its past, whether it be nostalgia baiting. Hey, remember this thing from the past?
If someone who knew the future pointed out a child to you and told you that that child would grow up totally evil.
Or repeating tried and true formulas. And this is my way of tying everything back to that central question I asked at the beginning: what kind of show is Doctor Who? I mean, really, what is this show trying to achieve? There is no right or wrong answer, but to me, Doctor Who is a show that is made to keep changing. Experiment with new ideas and never stay in the same place for too long. The idea of change is literally baked into its main character. It's a show designed to keep going forever. It's this that sets it apart from any other show on television. Even long-running soap operas, which generally stick to one genre or idea throughout their entire run. Maybe not every episode will land as well as the last one, but you know what? That's good, as long as the show never stops trying new things. And the fact that the show seems to be moving backwards, to me, is problematic. You can give me flack for saying this all you want, but honestly, on paper, Chibnall's first season as showrunner, Series 11, was more of a step in the right direction than the 60th. An opinion I'll probably get murdered for having. Now, let me clarify what I mean by that. I think Series 11 was bad, worse than the 60th by a lot. However, the concept behind this season was great, and it was only in execution where it faltered. Think about what this season was trying to do. All new villains throughout the entire season, meaning no recognizable faces returned. More weight being put onto history and social issues. An entirely new look, feel, and sound for the show that was unlike anything that had come before. A break from every single female character being a kinky dominatrix femme fatale who slaps the Doctor around but then falls in love with him and her whole life revolves around being in love with him. Oh, Moffat, you horny bastard. I really wish that this had succeeded, because this is what I wanted from Doctor Who following Moffat's exit. I wanted it to do something completely different. It tried, failed, and then ran back into familiar territory with its tail between its legs in Series 12.
Oops.
I'm gonna reiterate it, Doctor Who is a sandbox show. You can do literally anything with it. Any genre, any theme, any message, anything. Part of the reason I was put off the show for a while is because it felt like we were getting the same thing week after week. If you really look at it, it feels like 90% of episodes correspond to a given formula that's been repeated many times before. We got the subversion of history episodes, we got the base under siege episodes, we got the aliens invade London and everyone's shocked somehow, even though this is the 1000th time it's happened. Episodes. I can't count the amount of Doctor Who episodes that begin with the Doctor landing somewhere and being like, "Hello, companion. This is the cool place that I want to show you. What's this? This isn't how it's supposed to be. We must investigate by getting captured. Don't worry, they won't guard us." The rare episode that doesn't correspond to one of the pre-established formulas feels like such a breath of fresh air. That's why Wild Blue Yonder was my favorite of the specials, because it gave me what I wanted. A genuinely interesting science fiction idea told in a unique way. I truly think if you had to boil Doctor Who down to one central purpose, it's to explore. And I don't just mean the Doctor exploring the universe in the TARDIS, I mean that the purpose of the show is to explore storytelling, explore different genres, different perspectives, different hypothetical worlds, just to be boundless. Or at least as boundless as a show on this budget can be. But here's the thing, where you have true creativity, budget shouldn't matter. So this is the part where I bring up another show and suggest that Doctor Who should take notes from it. And there are a lot that come to mind, like Star Trek, The Twilight Zone, or even Black Mirror. But at their core, none of those shows are really similar to Doctor Who. Weirdly enough, I think the show that Doctor Who could take the most inspiration from is NBC's Community. Yes, a sitcom. Let me explain. Community is a show famous for changing up its genre almost every episode despite having, well, a sitcom's budget. From mafia spoofs to paintball wars to conspiracy webs to high science fiction concepts.
Just so you know, Jeff, you were now creating 6 different timelines.
Of course I am, Abed.
Despite being a sitcom failing in the ratings with an ever-dwindling budget, the show just could not stop giving because its creator cared that much. The similarities don't even end there. I mean, many of Doctor Who's most famous writers started as sitcom writers, and there's even a running joke within Community that one of the main characters is obsessed with a show called Inspector Spacetime, which is a clear allusion to Doctor Who. And then they did an episode in 2013 that predicted Doctor Who's future perfectly multiple times.
Wait, was there a female inspector?
Yes, and everyone hates her. Not because they're sexist, because she sucks.
That That is so great.
And the episode guest stars Matt Lucas, who would go on to be a Doctor Who companion a few years later. Do the writers of Community have a time machine? This has nothing to do with anything, by the way. I've just been waiting for an opportunity to talk about this for years. So what point am I trying to make here? If Community could do it, Doctor Who should be able to do it too. Part of what makes Community's genre-bending episodes work so well is that they're willing to push things to the limits. They change how the episodes are directed to reflect the genre they're replicating. Like, for instance, when doing an episode based on crime thrillers like Seven, they make the episode visually look like one of those movies.
How many photographs do people need?
Whereas Doctor Who rarely ever does that. It'll plop him in a new environment, but the episode will be directed same as ever. I know Doctor Who's not a comedy, but there's so much potential to have fun with the medium of film that the show just isn't experimenting with. Call this a radical overhaul if you will, but I think every Doctor Who episode should feel different from the last. I also think the show should make an effort to subvert its core tenets every now and again. A great example of an episode like this is Blink, an episode that barely features the Doctor, or Flatline, an episode where the Doctor and Clara switch places. As time has gone on, I think the show has gotten more and more scared to change up its core chemistry, and that's a crime because there's so much potential. Like, I'll just spitball some random examples. A Bottle episode where the Doctor and company get lost in the TARDIS corridors and can't find their way out. Not Journey to the Center of the TARDIS because that sucked. What about an episode where the TARDIS translation matrix breaks and now the Doctor and companions can no longer understand the alien species around them, leading to an Arrival type situation? What if the Doctor's new companion turns out to be a complete psychopath and tries to steal the TARDIS for nefarious purposes? What about an episode of the show that's directed exactly like an episode from the 80s would have been? Like, I mean, down to the music, editing, opening, everything. That would be peak. Russell's already done that and it's a sin, so he can do it again. Then there's just basic things about the show that recently have been coming off as a little lazy, like the fact that every single companion is a human from the current year. Why can't we get any companions who are aliens, or companions from the past or future? Classic Who had some really interesting dynamics between companions that came from radically different cultures. And why are there no recurring locations besides Earth? Wouldn't it be cool if there was some alien planet that we routinely visited throughout the seasons and saw it change due to the Doctor's influence over time? Again, even Classic Who had some locations like Peladon that we visited multiple times and saw the effects of the Doctor's last visit in action. Even if you don't love all of my ideas, I hope that I've conveyed to you that the show is barely scratching the surface of what it could do. So that's what I want to see from Russell T Davies' second era as showrunner. I want to see the show take advantage of the fact that it's Doctor Who and do things that no other show would dare, just with fewer deus ex machinas. So, what lies ahead for Doctor Who? Obviously, I sound fairly pessimistic, but I want to make it clear that the next season could very well be good. If Russell has taught me one thing over the years, it's that he can be very unpredictable. Sure, I'd like it if we had a brand new showrunner at the wheel, but all the leaks we've gotten and everything Russell has said about this season does imply that, at the very least, there will be some new ideas being kicked around, which is nice. Hello everybody. It's Verdana from the future, time traveling backwards into this video to let you all know what I'm sure you already know, which is that this video did not come out before the premiere of the new season. Now, to be fair, this isn't entirely my fault. The video actually would have been up in time if it weren't for YouTube dinging me with 1,000 copyright hits every time I tried to post it. However, if you're watching this, that means that I eventually win this war, which is nice to know. The point is, there are now 2 episodes out. Space Babies and The Devil's Cord. The former episode deals with the Doctor and Ruby's fight against a booger monster, and the latter deals with their fight against the maestro who wants to strip the world of music. And part of me is almost kind of glad that the video was delayed a little bit, because having seen these episodes, my fears have kind of been confirmed. Now, what I wanted to see from this era above anything else, like I said, was for it to try new ideas, and it is definitely doing that, so no complaints from me there. However, these episodes still feel like they're reliant on old formulas. It's funny that I went on about how Church on Ruby Road is very reminiscent of Rose, because Space Babies is very reminiscent of the end of the world. The Doctor and his new companion land on a space station set far in humanity's future, meet characters with bad CGI mouths, and fight against a mysterious, monstrous villain which turns out to be a red herring for the real baddie. There's even a scene in Space Babies that's almost identical to one from the end of the world, where the Doctor provides Ruby with the ability to phone her mom.
We're out of range. Just a bit.
Tell you what, with a little bit of jiggery pokery. There you go.
Mum?
What is it? What's wrong? What have I done now? Is there something wrong?
No, I'm fine. My mum, she's long gone now.
Can I see your phone? One phone call.
Well, what is it now?
Mum?
Yes, Mum, obviously.
They even end on the same joke.
I think that's amazing. You want to see the bill?
That's the best signal ever. How much that cost?
Except the scene is far less effective here than it was in the end of the world, because in that episode, Rose goes through a crisis, realizing that she's just abandoned her life and run away with a complete stranger.
I just sort of hitched a lift with this man. Didn't even think about it. Don't even know who he is. 5 billion years later, my mum's dead.
Bundle of laughs you are.
The episode actually tackles how jarring it would be for her to be in a foreign environment like this, whereas Space Babies more or less glosses over everything. Ruby barely even feels like she's a presence in this episode. When the Doctor gives her a TARDIS key, it doesn't feel earned the way it has in the past, because we've barely seen Ruby do anything. I think these issues with characterization continue into The Devil's Cord, an episode that has a scene in which Ruby sees the entire world having been destroyed because there's no more music.
I think without music, the human race goes sour. Without any way of expressing a broken heart, they go to war.
It's very Disney. And yet the episode barely focuses on how seeing something like this affected Ruby emotionally. It's played for one beat and then swiftly moved on from. Space Babies ends with a scene of her reuniting with her mum.
Tell your mum not to slap me.
But I think that scene would have worked a lot better at the end of this episode, since she came so close to losing her, instead of the dance party we get instead. And on the note of that dance party, why turn the episode into an all-out musical for the last 2 minutes of its runtime instead of just committing to making a musical episode of Doctor Who? I felt the same way about Church on Ruby Road. It's weird to just have one song. Never take a half measure, go all the way. Doing new ideas is only half the battle. The other half is executing them properly. And unfortunately, all of the issues that I highlighted in the previous specials are back and on crack. There are so many directorial decisions that I really have to question in both of these episodes. I mean, there are moments where it gets so batshit insane that I think I might love it.
Music battle.
But then there's like the scenes from Space Babies where they're talking to the Space Babies and it looks like one of the scenes from the Talking Dogs movies that they used to spam out in the 2000s.
I'm Captain Poppy, and I kept the station running for Mummy and Daddy.
In fact, the script of that episode also kind of feels like one of those movies. The Doctor almost sacrifices himself to save a booger monster that may or may not be sentient so that it can go on to continue terrorizing the children, because that's part of their development.
Babies need fiction, they need stories, they need monsters.
Yes. And then they blast off by using diaper poop. And also it's a metaphor for the anti-abortion movement.
The planet down below will refuse to stop the babies being born, but once they're born, they don't look after them.
It's a very strange planet.
Russell is obviously taking things to a very fantastical, happy-go-lucky kind of place with this season, at least the episodes of it that have come out so far. I do assume that he'll take things to a darker place. There was that whole spiel the Doctor went on about Susan.
Yo, what?
My granddaughter.
Susan.
We could go and have a look, but you know, timelines.
Where is she?
I don't know. Time Lords were murdered. Maybe it killed her too.
And based on how out of left field that was, I assume that he's going to bring back Susan in some capacity later in the season. Could Susan be Miss Flood? That's my official prediction. That's the Verdana theory. Could Susan be the one who waits? I mean, the Doctor did say that one day he'd come back.
One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back.
and then he never came back. That's like the one thing I've wanted to see Doctor Who do more than anything else for years, bring back Susan and have her be pissed at him for never coming back. So obviously the season still has potential to go interesting places, but as of right now, it seems too preoccupied with trying to do as many new things as possible and not concerned enough with doing any of those things right. Like, when you really think about it, both of these episodes have very little actual plot or substance. I was really looking forward to The Devil's Court. It was advertised as a Beatles episode of Doctor Who, something I've been waiting for a very long time, but this was false advertising. It was not a Beatles episode of Doctor Who. It was an episode of Doctor Who where the Doctor and Ruby run from Jinx Monsoon and we get exposition dumps and then they run from Jinx Monsoon again in a cycle. The Beatles get like a total of 2 minutes of screen time. Also, the plot of the episode is that Jinx Monsoon steals musicians' talent, but the song that the Beatles play at the beginning of the episode that's supposed to suck.
I've got a dog, he's called Fred. My dog is alive, he's not dead. I love my dog.
It unironically sounds like something the Beatles would have put out on the White Album. I don't really know what the episode's getting at. Russell has also just completely abandoned logical consistency and pivoted Doctor Who entirely towards fantasy and formalism. It's to the point where, like, it's not even worth criticizing plot holes anymore. Like, I could complain about the part in Space Babies where the Doctor is getting sucked out of an airlock, and instead of getting sucked through the hole in the ship's hull, he just gets sucked backwards towards the wall like a magnet. But there's no point. These episodes aren't trying to be realistic, they're just trying to vibe. The problem is that they don't really work tonally. There's a lot of jarring inconsistency. Like, 1 second the Doctor is talking about escaping a genocide, which is not only a very traumatic thing for him to have survived as a character, but it also parallels a real world experience that actor Ncuti Gatwa had to go through, being that he fled from the Rwandan genocide. And I don't think I'm mistaken in saying that the scene had a double meaning. And yet, like, 2 minutes later, they're talking to CGI space babies and making jokes about blowing noses, and I don't know if it works. At the beginning of this video, I compared the 60th anniversary specials to Trial of a Time Lord, and I was worried I might have been stretching a little bit, but having seen these episodes, there is one more undeniable parallel between the two that is becoming increasingly clear, and that's that Doctor Who is becoming pantomime. This is something that happened in the 1980s that everyone hated, and yet John Nathan Turner would not let up on.
I won't hurt you. I promise.
And I feel like it's happening again. Now, I'm just going to be frank with you guys. Russell T Davies is not a bad writer. He's proven this on shows like It's a Sin, as well as many of his past Doctor Who episodes. But if I'm being honest, he struggles when writing episodes with a lighter tone. This has always been the case. I just think his strengths as a writer lie in writing dark content. I mean, really think about what his best contributions to the Doctor Who universe have been. Midnight, The Waters of Mars, Children of Earth. All exceptionally fucked up stories. I just don't think Russell is playing to his strengths as a writer by lightening the tone the way that he is. If the goal of these episodes is supposed to be to relaunch the show into the success it once knew, I think Russell should prepare himself to be disappointed. Like, even if you like these new episodes, just bear with me for a second. Imagine some random Disney Plus Marvel fan opening up Disney Plus and seeing Doctor Who pop up on the home screen. Can you picture them watching Space Babies and then saying to themselves, yeah, this show really appeals to me and my interests. I think I will keep going. What age demographic is this show trying to hit? And on that note, these episodes don't even really work as a jumping on point for new viewers. The first episode that's listed on Disney Plus as part of Season 1 is Church on Ruby Road, but if you start there, you'll be missing necessary information from the specials like the Doctor's fight with the Toymaker, which is a huge part of the plot of The Devil's Court.
I told you when we first met, I said the Toymaker, and defeating him, it ripped me in half.
So, okay, let's say that the real jumping on point is supposed to be the Star Beast, except that that episode is so tangled in lore from the show's past that a new viewer wouldn't really be able to make sense of it. So where is the jumping on point? I don't see where new viewers are supposed to come on board. My goal here is not to be negative, but I just don't think this new era of the show was very well thought out. It's not friendly to new viewers. The tone is all over the place. I can't even tell if we're supposed to take the plot seriously anymore, and it kills me because in some ways Doctor Who is trying new ideas finally, but again, just the same problems that have persisted for so long continue to haunt the show. Even with all this new budget, the issues in the show's direction just continue to persist. It really cannot escape this time loop it's been locked into. I really think that in past years, Doctor Who writers have taken the term kids show too literally. Remember, Chris Chibnall has proven himself to be a capable writer on shows like Broadchurch, and yet his era turned out the way it did, likely because he thought he had to dumb everything down, and I think the same thing might be happening again with Russell. I could keep going, but I think I've said enough. I'll let Past Me finish the video off. So maybe Series 14, Season 1 will be a breath of fresh air. Maybe. That being said, as I've highlighted in this video, there are deeper issues with Doctor Who and its production that I think still need to be addressed. Problems that I think are a result of the show refusing to regenerate. Because if I'm being honest, I think it's been clinging on to its past for a little too long now. That doesn't mean that an 80s episode wouldn't be cool though, that's the exception. That would be awesome. It may be true that the show is in many ways on trial just as it was in 1986, but history need not repeat itself, the outcome need not be the same so long as the show keeps moving forward. And in that regard, I am slightly concerned. In some ways, the bi-generation may have been a good metaphor for the state of the show. Instead of moving forwards, it's kind of moving sideways. Sure, it might try some new things in its new season, but at its core, it's the same people and the same style as ever. And personally, I think it's time for the show to move on and accept real change. I also think the way the show's managed needs to be completely overhauled and redrafted, but hey, baby steps. Come the new series, will I get more of what I want? Who knows? Who knows? But hey, when all is said and done, even if the show isn't exactly what I want it to be, at least we still have it, right? It's been with us for 60 years. Here's to another 60. Maybe in that span of time there will finally be an episode set in Canada. Maybe. Maybe not. We'll see. Moral of the story.
Time travel is really hard to write about!
Wow. What a video. I think I've pretty much just given up trying to reel myself in, and I'm just gonna make videos that are whatever length I feel that they need to be, and maybe they'll take 4 months to make. We'll just have to deal with that. I was genuinely considering if I should just delay this video altogether until after the season comes out, but why make everything take a few more weeks just so that I can have a brief segment at the end talking about my thoughts on the season? The truth is, regardless of the quality of the upcoming season, everything I said about the 19 years of the show that have come out up to this point will still be true. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed watching the longest video I've ever made. It definitely took a slab of my soul to get this done, so I hope it was worth it. I'm gonna go relish in the fact that I chased MatPat off YouTube with my Five Nights at Freddy's video. You know it's true, he quit one day after I uploaded my video. It can't be a coincidence. If you guys liked this video, you could have seen it earlier on my Patreon for the low price of whatever it happens to be when you check it. Might change. Not only that, but you could have seen an earlier version of it and given me feedback on what you thought I should cut or change. And of course, a warm shout out to my current patrons, those being A-Camp, McLovin, No D Pop, Hernandez, JH, Bitter Old Woman, Kibby Sabrina, Bill Skates, and Fiddle Stinks. You all make it happen. The Absorbaloff, The Living Fat Creatures, Pete, remember Pete? Spearhead from Space, Pyramids of Mars, Timelash,
Genesis of the Daleks,
Delta and the Bannermen, Delta and the Bannermen, Gareth Roberts,
take the load.